Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video. Before I begin on the stories, I just wanted to mention, if you have your own personal scary story that you would like to send me for me to possibly narrate here on the channel, you can do so. Happened back in the beginning of 2021 when I was only 13. This may not be scary compared to half the stories put on here, but it's something that I heavily regret ever having a memory of. I had an online app called Amino at the time, where a whole bunch of communities would have chats and posts of things related to the platform. I was really big on anime, and I was really alone at the time of not being able to see my friends or leave the house. So I went online for attention and for some new friends. I chose the My Hero Academia one because I figured I'd find some people like me alone and seeking of attention. I met a few amazing people along the way, and a few creeps here and there as well. But there's this one person who will always stick out as someone who deserves to just rot in hell. I met him in a chat room of some new friends, and we were all on a voice call in the chat with a few people coming and leaving. Until this one boy came in and started talking to us. He seemed very nice and talked to us for about 20 minutes, until he friended me and started to chat with me privately, saying how nice it was to meet me and how cute my voice was. Let's just call this guy Nobody, because he really is and forever will be a nobody. I was friendly, and I responded the same way to him, not thinking anything of it. But after 2 days was when he started to become way too friendly and flirty. Mind you, I was just 13 at the time, and I'd never had any kind of this attention, so it felt weird but cool, coming from who I found out was an 18-year-old. When finding this out, I even told him on call that it was wrong to be talking to him and for him to be acting flirty because I was only 13, when he had thought I was 14, which still doesn't make a fucking difference for being an adult and flirty with a minor. But he guilt-tripped me by then saying,
"It doesn't matter, it's fine. We're not doing anything bad. I really care about you so much, and I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose you like I lost my last girlfriend,"
who supposedly committed suicide. But looking back, I don't think he could pull anyone besides innocent minors. This also had me confused at the time, because he also had made it seem like I was going to kill myself like his ex did. But being young and foolish, I pushed that aside. Nobody would talk to me late at night on school days when I would always be tired and trying to sleep. He would always call me and say stuff like,
"What are your kinks? Have you ever wanted to try that? Do you like me? What if I did this to you when we were older? And the worst, are you turned on from this?"
He had me like this for 3 days, going back and forth on his wild imagination and trying to plant these weird-ass images into my mind. The worst of it all was if I fell asleep, he would keep calling and calling until he was finally done repeating anything I didn't hear or fell asleep on, or say goodnight to me after falling asleep too much on him. I told 2 of my online friends about this the next night, just to see their opinions on what he's been saying to me, and if it was okay. And they had totally flipped out, telling me he's a pedophile and how gross and disgusting he was, and how I should really tell him off and report his ass, which I did. I told him off, calling him a creepy child chaser, and how making me feel guilty of his actions are wrong, making me stay up late at night and listen to his fucked up imagination to get me to also feel, what, turned on? Fuck no. After calling him out, I blocked him and reported him, but I don't think anything ever came of it. Seeing how later, I would find out from another friend in the chat that I'd met that he was now dating a girl in the chat who I knew. But hey, not my clowns, not my circus. And wherever this adult fucking creep of a nobody may be, I hope he rots in hell. He really deserves it for making me feel so weak and like a fool. I've gotten over it, but it will always be a lesson to learn from, and what plays at the back of my mind whenever a creep tries to DM me or tries to get any satisfaction from me. Be safe out there, and tell off your predators. I would like to start off by saying that I know I was naive, but I was young and trying to be normal. I was 18 and I just started my freshman year of college. I graduated in June of 2020 and started college that August. The COVID regulations were still really strict, and it was impossible to meet people. My high school graduating class was 31 students. Needless to say, I grew up in a super small town. All in all, really safe, and everyone knew everyone. I don't have a good relationship with my parents, so I moved to New England 10 hours away from home, just outside a pretty big city. I didn't know anyone in my school, but I'd met a girl in the freshman Facebook group that I became friends with. We were hanging out in her apartment, and she recommended I make a Tinder to meet people. I was nervous about it, but after some persuading, I ended up making one. As usual, immediately after making it, I got a big influx of matches. One Saturday, I was bored in my room swiping, and I matched with this guy. He was cute, and he was in the Navy. He DM'd me, and we talked a little bit. He was only going to be in the city for the weekend, but when he asked me for my number, I gave it to him anyway. He FaceTimed me a little later on. He looked just like his picture, and I could tell from the loud music in the background that he was at a bar. He told me he and some friends were having a party, and he wanted to invite me. I had never been to a party before. I wasn't very popular in high school. I told him that I was unsure, but that I would text him and let him know. He continued trying to convince me to come over text. I called my best friend back home to ask for her advice. I have social anxiety, and I often let it get the best of me, missing out on normal young person activities. She convinced me to go, and so I texted him for the address of where to meet him. Freshmen can't have their cars on campus at my school, so I had to take an Uber. I Ubered the address, which was at the bar he had been at. I text him, and he meets me outside the bar. His speech is slurring, and he's way drunker than he had been on the phone from before. He told me that everyone else headed back to the hotel for the party, and that he was just waiting for me. We start walking to the hotel, and I'm a little on edge, but I didn't know how to get out of this situation. Halfway into the walk into the hotel, I realize my keys are gone, and I'm gonna need them to get into my dorm building and my room. It had started raining, so we ducked underneath the overhang of one of the buildings while I called the driver. He did have my keys, thank God. He said he was currently on a drive, but to text him the address of the hotel and he'd bring them to me after. I texted him the address, and we continued walking to the hotel to get out of the rain. As we walked into the hotel, my driver then said that he would be about 20 minutes, and he would call me when he arrived. Me and my date, if you want to call him that, walked into the hotel room. And surprise, there's no party, just two of his Navy buddies. This was the moment where I knew I had fucked up pretty bad, but I really didn't know what to do. I had to wait for my keys. I tried to act normal. One of the guys then said to me,
Is this what 18-year-olds do in Pennsylvania? Meet up with 3 random guys?
And I had no idea what to say or do. He gets me a White Claw that I was just pretending to drink, while he and I laid on one bed, and the other 2 guys on the other, and turned on a movie. He kept trying to kiss me, and I would pull away. Finally, the Uber driver gets to the hotel with my keys, and he calls me. Sadly, my date insists on following me out to get my keys from the driver. I thank the guy, giving him a $10 bill for driving my keys to me. I began texting my friend, who convinced me to come clean about the situation. I was terrified, but I didn't know how to get out without confrontation. Due to my PTSD, I can't handle conflict very well. We get back to the room and he tries pushing me into the bathroom. I told him I didn't want to do that, and got him to lay down on the bed with me. I'm pretty good at de-escalating drunk people since I am an EMT. He kept kissing me and telling me that we should go into the bathroom because he could tell that his friends were making me nervous. Every time I would turn away, pretending to drink my drink, I would text my friend. He started kissing me really hard, his mouth muffling my protests. He was strong, and he grabbed my arms, pinning them at my sides because I was trying to push him off. I rolled to the side, texting my friend, telling her to call me with an emergency in a few minutes. He pinned me down again and shoved his knee in between my legs. I was trying not to cry, and I was trying to tell him to slow down, but his mouth was once again muffling my protests. My phone started ringing, and he finally got off of me. I told him I needed to answer it. My friend was now crying that she had forgot her keys, that she was at our dorm, and that she fell down the stairs and they were gone. She was pretending to be my roommate. I leaped up from the bed and grabbed my shoes, bidding a speedy goodbye as he started yelling at me. I ran into the room and put my shoes on in the elevator. My friend stayed on the phone with me the whole Uber ride home. Before everyone tears me up and my friend in the comments, she was in Pennsylvania, and there's no way she would have known what the situation was going to be like. She was trying to support me by telling me to go. It was just a really bad guy and bad decision, and now I know that I shouldn't have went to the hotel with that guy. I know now that I shouldn't have cared about the confrontation, and I should have just had the Uber take me home when I got my keys. But I was naive. I know it was my own stupidity that got me into that situation. My hands are shaking just typing this. For context, I was a 15-year-old girl, and in my first year of high school. I didn't know many people as I just moved, so none of my middle school friends went to my same high school. It's also important to note that I had an online boyfriend during the beginning of this whole ordeal. Anyways, here's my story. I remember becoming low-key friends with a couple of people in my history class, and from the start, I had been told about some drama that was happening between a guy and his girlfriend in the group. Their names were Ethan and Sid. One of the other guys in the group wanted to know about what was going on because he noticed that Ethan didn't seem happy anymore, so he sent me to go find out the story. Now, as a 15-year-old girl, drama was one of those things that was, well, super interesting to me. Plus, I had Ethan in a couple of my classes, and I was looking for a new friend. As I said, all of my old friends and I drifted apart. I had no idea the extent to which Sid was a psycho until I was fully involved, and it was too late by then. Ironically, Sid was the one who introduced me to Ethan, by her asking me what I thought about something political, and she and I bonded for a short moment, while I remember that Ethan just stood there awkwardly. I was then asked to join their Discord server, which opened me up to their entire crazy-ass friend group that has since fallen apart. I wouldn't say I was a catalyst for this to happen, but it's a pretty good assumption to make. I slowly began talking to Ethan, as it was my original goal to hear all the drama, but as I got close to him to talk about the situation, I slowly became more and more pissed off at Sid for being a really bad person to him, because to me, he was a pretty sweet guy. About a month into having a daily counseling session during our band class, I would say we pretty much became best friends. Once Sid realized this is where her psycho-ass behavior really went off the deep end. She had told him that she didn't want him to talk to me because she didn't like me, and she was really suspicious of me trying to steal him from her. Mind you, like I mentioned earlier, I was already taken by someone, and all I literally wanted to do was just try and help him and get out of the depression she put him in. Sid was the type who told Ethan that he wasn't allowed to talk to any other girls and would take his phone and read through it all the time. She didn't even want to let him hang out with his guy friends, and she would constantly guilt trip him for leaving her for other people. Not only was she controlling as fuck, but she was completely hypocritical. She would constantly flirt with other guys and would always get mad if Ethan happened to look over at her phone screen, nor would she let him even hold her phone. One time she sent lewd photos to one of Ethan's friends, and when he found out, she blamed it on him for not paying enough attention to her, and that's why she felt the need to get validation from other people. Now, Sid was also the type of girl to self-diagnose with a number of different mental illnesses that seemed to change really often, but we all agreed that she was at least bipolar. She would always blame every episode of her just being a crazy-ass bitch on her mental illness, which really annoyed the shit out of me. Whenever Ethan tried to confront her about his feelings or saying he felt depressed, she would get mad, then saying, "My mental health can't handle your emotions. Stop trying to put your emotions on me, because all it does is add more stress to my situation, and I just can't handle it." She even went as far as to calling him selfish for even thinking of telling her about his feelings. Crazy, I know. Anyhow, once she decided she hated me, I never got to see Ethan unless it was during our small sessions in band class or over text. Once during our homecoming dance, I got permission from my boyfriend to go with another guy friend. Sid found this out and literally went through my friends on Discord, then messaged him, telling him I was there with another guy to try and start something. Needless to say, I confronted her all about it, and she literally just sat there and stared daggers at me without saying a single word. To keep things semi-short, she went around calling me a bitch and all these names to anyone who would listen. She even insulted my artwork I made. Finally, I literally just gave up at refuting the stuff she said. I figured getting a reaction out of me was what she wanted, so I just pretended she didn't exist. Sid finally ended up breaking up with Ethan about 3 or 4 months in. And of course, he was devastated and still really attached to her. Plus, I found out that they had sex, and that apparently Ethan did it in hopes that she would love him more. But that wasn't the case, obviously. Now, Sid moves on almost immediately and starts fucking around with the guys in the big friend group, but at the same time still keeps Ethan under her thumb. This, of course, is where I get annoyed with him. Stop sitting next to her and touching up on her arms and stuff. Y'all are broken up for a reason, for real. She can't tell you what you can and can't do anymore, so why do you keep listening to her? Looking back, I realized that I was jealous over Ethan, and I hated the way she was treating him because I wanted his attention too, but she wouldn't let him. Now, when it comes to me and my online boyfriend, I eventually broke up with him the day before Valentine's Day because he constantly ignored me and acted like he didn't care about me for far too long. Plus, I realized that I kind of felt something for Ethan. You would think maybe since Sid moved on, she wouldn't care anymore about us. But I was very wrong. She was completely obsessed over Ethan for the entire summer and threatened to kill herself because of him, and even sending pictures of the cuts on her arms saying he caused it. She went around and told all of her friends that I told her to go kill herself. And some chick even handed me a letter of her telling me I was a terrible person for saying that to someone, when I literally never talked to her in the first place. Not to mention, she started creating fake accounts left and right to talk to Ethan after he blocked her over and over again on different social media. Finally, I was just so over the whole fucking thing that I literally called her out on her bullshit, and I told her to fuck off, which she surprisingly did. From then on, I hadn't really heard anything from her until the end of the school year. Now, whenever COVID-19 hit, we were told we had the next day off of school. And honestly, I was a bit bummed that I wouldn't get to see Ethan. By this point, me and him were practically dating. Just we didn't get together yet because I was still getting over my now ex. A couple of days later, and we're still at home. That's when I get a call from Ethan. Listen, don't freak out, okay? But something happened, and the principal's gonna call your parents soon. My mom told me to let you know first so you won't be scared. Well, what's it about? I asked, clearly panicked. It's about Sid. Apparently her and my old best friend Harrison had some conversations over text, and it's bad. Turns out, Ethan's old friend had tried to kill himself the night before, and his mom went through his phone to see if there was any reason why. And that's when she saw the messages and notified the police, who then notified the school. Apparently, there was very explicit conversations detailing when, how, and where they had planned to stab me and Ethan to death at school. Now, the thought alone is creepy enough, but hear me out. The police found a large kitchen knife stuffed in the guy's backpack, and they said they had planned to do it on that Friday, as was mentioned several times in the chat. Yeah, the Friday that just so happened to be canceled because of COVID. Needless to say, the kid stayed in the mental hospital and was expelled from our school. But Sid just wasn't allowed to return to school in person, and instead just stay online until the coming year, which, unfortunately for me, is going to be during my junior year if she returns. Ethan and I are still dating to this day after all this time, and I'd like to say that we're a very happy couple. It's really crazy to think that one of us could have lost our lives on that Friday if we hadn't had the pandemic start when it did. All I'd like to say is, Sid, I really hope I never have to see your sorry face or name around my school ever again, you crazy psycho.
This morning I woke up in pitch black to the sound of my phone making a tone I've never heard before. Sort of a rapid-fire pinging. I turned it on to see what was going on, and there was an alert notification. A lot like the ones you see with Amber Alerts. What was odd was I couldn't close it or even turn my phone off. The screen simply wouldn't respond to being powered off. I couldn't screenshot it either. All the functions other than the scrolling were disabled. But this is what it said.
Alert. On October 10th, 2016, at 3:15 a.m., the following alert was issued. Reports of an anomalous signature on radar were reported near St. Cloud. Advisory. Stay indoors. Bring all house pets inside. Turn off all noise-making devices. Seek shelter in basements or rooms without windows or doors to the outside. Emergency services are suspended until 5:30, October 10th, 2016. Threat level is severe. Obey all instructions to prevent unnecessary loss of life or property. Alert is valid until 8 p.m.
Now obviously, this was pretty fucking concerning. It's late in the season for any large storms, but it's not unheard of. And we've had tornadoes here before. I could hear the rain on the windows and the sounds of wind. So I grabbed my 3 cats and took us down to the basement with some food and a sleeping bag. My basement is cramped and full of all kinds of junk. I wasn't thrilled to be spending time down there, but the alternative was clearly not an option. While the cats wandered around, digging in boxes and knocking things over, I had time to sit and read the alert over and over again, which is when things started to seem strange. I must have missed it the first time, But now I noticed the warning to turn off all noise-making devices. What did that mean? Why would that be important? Even with the television at full blast, you'd certainly be able to hear a tornado coming, or at the very least see the damage it was inflicting. I reluctantly admitted that, looking at it that way, it seemed at least a little more reasonable. But now I was also looking at the alert itself. The interface of the warning wasn't one I recognized. The border wasn't consistent with any apps or the OS. I wondered if it was a virus. I had to work in a few hours, and didn't want to stay awake for nothing. Leaving the cats downstairs, I went up and turned on the television in the living room. I wasn't really sure what to expect, but I couldn't help but feel another jolt of fear when the same message popped up in a traditional emergency broadcast. The awful klaxon made my heart rate spike, so I turned it off and went back to the basement to wait it out. I sent my boss a text on my old pay-as-you-go, which seemed to be unaffected for whatever reason, letting him know I might not be able to make it in that day. As it turned out, he was also in his basement. We could hear what sounded like heavy rainfall and wind outside. We wished each other well, agreed that work would be canceled, and went back to waiting. The cats settled in various places, and I curled up in my sleeping bag and fell asleep. We all woke at the same time about an hour later. It wasn't as much a jolt as a slow, confusing awakening. Something wasn't right. The cat's eyes were wide, their fur puffed up. One, my oldest girl, had her eyes locked on the filthy little window at the far corner of the room. I was absolutely overcome by a palpable sense of dread, but my frantic glances around the room were fruitless. The cats began to hiss, all of them looking at the window now. But I couldn't see anything except darkness. I turned towards the stairs, and the change in direction allowed me to hear something below the growling and hissing. A very low hiss. Not like static, but like the sound of blood flowing through your ears when it's quiet. It was incredibly unsettling to hear it coming from an outside source. It was such an intimate, familiar sound. Hearing it that way was very wrong. And I could also hear, bizarrely, what sounds like calliope music. At this point, I was convinced I was losing my mind, or having an incredibly lucid dream. But when one of the cats leaped from a box to fly across the room and under the stairs, I realized what it was. I ran to the box and tore it open. I dug through the contents until I felt a cold metal. I lifted out the toy, which had been activated by my cat's weight, and scrambled for the battery panel. Once the batteries were out and the music had stopped, I stood breathing heavily, holding the little bear in my hands. A music box my mom had given me as a kid. The bear, rosy-cheeked, smiled up at me, and I thought I would scream. The hissing noise was louder here, oppressive, and it blocked out everything, even my breathing. I've heard the phrase paralyzed with fear before, and I detested it, thinking of it as clumsy exaggeration. But now I realized that it wasn't. It was a very real feeling. The cats continued to howl and shriek, though here in the middle of the sound, it was almost impossible to hear them. I had to turn around. I had to get away from the window, but I simply could not bring myself to move even a single inch. The bear grinned up at me, and I hope I never come that close to the abyss again. The feeling of your mind slipping into the endless chasm is something you don't forget. The bear was cold in my hands. The cat shrieked and howled, and the sound grew so loud I could feel it in my bones. The window rattled, pelted by rain and hail, and the endless hellish dark loomed closer and closer. I screamed, bubbled up and pushed against my teeth when I turned to look through the dirty glass. Instantly, everything stopped. The cats hissing, and the rain, the wind, and the basement was silent. The succession of every single sound in that room was almost enough to send me teetering off the edge. I shivered violently, suddenly freezing. Something was outside, looking in at me. It glowed dimly, with a strange, completely alien light. Dirty orange, the color of nuclear sunset. The panic was so great now that it had transformed into an almost ethereal disassociation. The calm before the predator rips into flesh and bone. Something was at the window. I looked at it with glassy eyes. I don't know what it was. Looking at it was painful in a way I can't describe. The sight of it, so completely foreign, made my brain feel as if it was being exploded violently outward, tearing at the seams. The only thing that comes close is an optical illusion, something that exists but cannot be. Whatever it was, it had no business here. It was a kind of cloud, a solidified mist, like smoke. But the smoke was very much alive and aware. It was massive, and I think it must have messed with some of my other senses, because I was very much cognizant of the fact that it was larger than my house, larger than many houses. It had been drawn to the calliope music. It watched me, shapes swirling and dissolving constantly in its body. But it had no defined shape. It flowed like water, slid down the window in rivulets that did not obey gravity, but instead searched for cracks in the glass. I was aware of time passing, a lot of time. What broke the spell was the sight of one of those drops discovering and worming its way through a hairline crack in the window frame. Paralysis became flight, and in what felt like an instant, I was pounding up the stairs. My mouth retched open in a silent howl. The cats swarmed up past me and were gone the moment the door was open. I slammed it shut and ran for the bathroom, where I bolted the door and promptly vomited into the toilet. I flushed the strange reddish-brown contents and curled on my side, wedged between the toilet and the tub, my face against the cool porcelain. I passed out. When I woke up, it was half a day later, and my cats were furious at the lack of food. I've been in a daze since I woke up. The alert is gone, but it seems the phone lines are down. I have access to the internet, but it's not behaving correctly. I have access to some sites, but not others. And I can't bring myself to leave the house. The sound is gone, as is whatever was creating it. But how I can be sure it won't come back? For now, I've silenced everything. The cats are calm and sleeping, but I'm keeping an eye on them for any warning signs. I'll just keep quiet for a while. It's probably best if you keep quiet too.
Uh, oh, interesting. There you go. I don't know what the hell's going on with that. Oh, that's what I need to fix. Well, whenever it's done saving. And story time. Let's just redo these. And so many people are upset with Clip Studio now. Subscription. I knew they were going to go in that direction anyway. Thank God I don't really do 2D sketches anymore. Just if I do, I'll just move over to Krita. Not liking exactly how the faces have been turning out for me lately, so trying to improve with it. I still had her ears just because I know it's gonna probably, says I'm probably gonna use this as a few other poses, but damn, still don't like the eyes. I think they're still too large. There it is. I want to start posing this soon. I can start detailing it out. I was wondering, like, for a second, why the hell the ears were popping up the way they were. And they're a little too high, too. Oops. Say, you know what, let's make sure everything's okay because I keep having issues. think I might redo the tiara.
Welcome to the Dark Somnium. All sound design, video editing, graphic design, and composing is done by me. If you would like to reuse any of the assets that I've created for these stories, feel free to contact me. With that said, I hope you enjoyed today's story. I Was Not a Bad Kid by Nico Wonderust. I remember it so clearly. The memories have been repressed for so long. How come my parents never spoke about this with me? How did I forget something so horrifying? To tell you the truth, it's not something I want to be etched in my mind. And I'm not quite sure why it's there, but there's nothing I can do about it now. Not when I can see it so clearly. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the putrid smells. The year was 1985. I was only 11 at the time. I lived with my parents in Lebanon. I remember one night I was sleeping over at my best friend's house. Anthony was his name. How did I forget about Anthony? He lived alone with his father. His mother had died during childbirth, and I've got to say, his father was strict. But I guess he only wanted a polite son who was brought up properly. It was around 8 p.m. when Anthony and I were just finishing up eating. We were around the dinner table when Anthony asked his father if we could go watch TV. Bad kids don't eat all their greens, his father replied. But Dad, Anthony started saying when his father interrupted, bad kids don't eat all their greens. With which, Anthony finished up all his vegetables and stood up. His father cleared his throat. Bad kids don't have manners, he said sternly. May we be excused, Father? His father nodded. We both left the table just in time to catch the end of some TV show Anthony was obsessed with. I don't recall the name of it. All I can remember is that it had something to do with puppets, which doesn't narrow it down much. I know. My cellar? If you do. After the show had finished, address. Anthony said we should get ready for bed. He only had one bed, so we would have to top and tail. We got ready for bed, quickly ran upstairs, and settled down to get ready to sleep. And then things got weird. Anthony had a clock next to his bed, and he seemed to be counting down the minutes, watching his clock intently. What are you doing? I asked. No reply. Anthony. He turned his head slightly, seemingly keeping one eye on the clock. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 9 p.m. Time for sleep, he muttered, before turning over and closing his eyes. Through the darkness, Anthony, I whispered. Why are you staring at the clock like that? No reply. Why won't you talk to me? I'm gonna ask your father to take me home. No, he shouted under his breath. Just go to sleep. We're already late. I was understandably confused by this, and he quit my curiosity. Late? What do you mean, we're late? Late for what? I asked. Anthony sat up, looked me dead in the eye, and said, Bad kids stay up late. Then laid back down and went to sleep. I didn't know what to make of this. I wasn't a bad kid and never hurt anyone. I sure as hell never disrespected my elders. I was a good kid. I must have laid in the darkness for over an hour thinking about what Anthony had just said. The way he acted as if out of pure fear was his problem, I thought to myself. Unbeknown to me, I was soon to find out. A strange smell began to fill the air, which to my 11-year-old nose was quite peculiar. But now, years on and thinking back, I can only describe it as having an acetone-like smell. I began to feel as though time was slowing down. I heard a little voice from the other side of the door whisper, "Bad kids stay up late." And everything went dark. I woke to the sound of crying children, and I was laying on a hard wooden surface, on what seemed like a bed somebody had made from an old table. I looked around, wondering where I was, and trapped in a small, blood-stained room, surrounded by small bones scattered on the floor. There was a small cage hanging from the ceiling with an old microphone inside, and a clock on the wall next to some writing. Scratched into the wall, it said, "Bad kids stay up late." It was 3:45, and I could do nothing but sit on the floor wondering what was going on. I was terrified for my life, all alone and trapped in the room for hours before I heard shuffling around the outside. The clock read 7 o'clock. I looked through the keyhole, and what I saw made no sense. There was a man wearing a bear costume. Was this some kind of sick joke? "Anthony!" I screamed. "Do you have something to do with this?" Typical. No reply. I could see the man in the bear costume moving around, pushing a cart carrying plates and glasses. He disappeared out of sight for a split second, and then, as if appearing out of nowhere, he put his eye in from the keyhole, and I fell back, terrified. A smell similar to the one in Anthony's house began to fill the room, and then it went dark. I woke sometime later to a plate of stale bread and a glass of water by the door inside the room. I just sat and stared at it for a few minutes, before there was a big bang on the door and a man's voice said, "Bad kids don't eat their food." I wasn't going to touch anything that psychopath gave me. What if he had poisoned it? "I'm not a bad kid, but I'm not eating anything," I said. The door began to unlock, the sound of bolt after bolt clicking as a man in the bear costume unlocked them one by one. The door swung open and he flew at me, picking me up by the throat and slamming me into the wall. "Bad kids don't eat their food," he screamed in a muffled voice through the bear costume. He then threw me onto the bed, picked up a slice of bread and began ripping off small pieces, stuffing them into my mouth, forcing me to eat. After both slices of bread were gone, he handed me a glass of water. "Bad kids don't drink their water." I don't want him to pour the water down my throat. I was already in too much pain and didn't want to choke on water too. So I took it from him and drank it all in one big gulp before handing him back the glass. "Bad kids don't use their manners," he said, staring me down. Thank you," I replied as if begging for my life. He then left, locking the door behind him. And once again I was alone, staring at the bones on the floor. I need to get out of here, I thought to myself, looking for a way out, but there was nothing. 4 walls and a door. How was I supposed to get out of here? Softly, I heard that voice again booming from beyond the door. "Bad kids stay up late." I looked at the writing on the wall, and then at the clock. It was 9 o'clock. I don't want to find out what happened to the bad kids who don't go to sleep. So I laid on the bed and closed my eyes. And this went on for days, weeks even. I was alone all day, surrounded by sounds of children crying and screaming for their parents all day long. I didn't have a toilet, and so I'd have to do my business in the corner, which eventually built up a putrid sewage-like smell, mixing with the smell of blood and death that was already lingering in the air. 7 o'clock would come back around, and I would hear shuffling around outside the door, followed by a familiar smell, and then darkness. I would awaken to a plate of bread and a glass of water, which, unless I wanted to be force-fed piece by piece again, I would quietly sit down and eat before the smell poured back in, and I'd be smothered in darkness once again. Waking up shortly after, I'd find myself pacing the room, staring at the clock. 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30, almost 9 o'clock, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bad kids stay up late, I thought to myself. climbing onto my cold, hard bed. This is the first time in who knows how long the man's voice didn't call out, reminding us we had to go to sleep. All of a sudden, I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from the other side of the building. Bad kid, stay up late. Bad kid, stay up late. I thought to myself, closing my eyes as tight as I could. The screaming continued for 4 solid minutes, and then another kid started to scream too. By now, the smell of smoke was pouring into my room. I jumped up and looked through the keyhole. There were piles of burning wooden furniture stacked up against the back wall of the building. Through the doors and into the rooms where I assumed other children were. I never wanted to get out of this
Stupid
room as much
autosave is
as I
getting on my
did.
nerves.
But maybe it was safer in here. I heard shuffling around the outside and instantly ran to bed, hiding under it. And there it was. My way out. How had I not noticed this before? I mean, the bed was pretty low, but I never ever thought to look. Here it was the whole time, a vent. I didn't know where it led. I didn't care. All I knew was I had to get out. I began pulling and scratching at the vent, but it was screwed on tight. I decided to crawl out from under the bed, grabbing the largest of the small bones scattered around the room. I had to try to jam them behind the vent to break it off. After 4 or 5 attempts, and 3 of the bones breaking in small fragments, the vent came loose, and I wasted no time climbing in. I had no idea how long I was in there. My face pressed up against the cold, solid base of the vent. The sound of children scream, crying out for help. I must have blacked out because the next thing I remember is the unsettling silence that filled the air. The smell of smoke and burning flesh still lingered. I looked out from the vent and my door was still closed. I somehow managed to avoid the flames just outside this room. I climbed out from the vent, walked up to the door, and peered through the keyhole. The whole place was still. The fire had long since gone out, and there was no sign of life anywhere. And this is my chance to escape. Finally, freedom was within reach. I crawled back into the vent and started exploring, frantically searching for my way out. But it was badly damaged. Around every corner was dead end or a bend upwards, and there was no way I could climb that. I must have been stuck in that godforsaken place for days. No food, no water, nothing. Just the sound of silence and a rotten stench of excrement and smoke still lingering in the air. The loneliness was driving me insane. And then there was the unmistakable sound of shuffling outside the door. I dived into the vent, holding it closed behind me. On the other side of the vent was the sound of somebody forcibly breaking the locks. Was it him? Did he notice I wasn't in the room? The door slowly opened and a person walked in. I could only see the legs through the gap in the vent, but he wasn't wearing the bear costume. I wasn't taking any chances. I stayed right where I was. And after a minute or so, the person left, and the door was left open. I waited a couple minutes just to make sure they weren't coming back, and then I crawled out of the vent, left the room, and made a dash for the exit. I ran through the metal rusty door into the street. I was in the middle of nowhere. I decided there was only one thing for it. I had to pick a direction and commit to it, and so I did. I was walking for what seemed like hours, when in reality, I was probably only walking for 20 minutes. When I heard the sound of cars, lots of cars, I was near a road. I had to get help. I ran towards the sound of cars, waving my arms about in the air like a child possessed. "Help!" I screamed. "Help, please!" A car pulled over to the side of the road, and out stepped a young woman, asking what was wrong. I briefly told her about what happened to me. She was horrified, and she recalls seeing me on the news. She offered to take me to the local police station. I looked in the back seat and could see she had 2 children of her own. "No, please, just take me home," I pleaded. The woman opened the back door of her car, waited for me to sit down, and then closed the door before sitting in the driver's seat. After giving her my address, she began to drive. I was silent the whole way home. Upon arrival, I jumped out of the car, turned to thank the woman, and then ran up my garden path. Slamming my fist repeatedly against the front door, both my parents came out, and tears started to fill their eyes. I went inside with my father, and my mother went to speak with the woman in the car. When my mother came inside, I told both my parents about the whole ordeal, and they rang the police. The police took statements and description of the man in the bear costume, and a manhunt for the murderous psychopath soon followed. We skipped town and moved to a quiet little place in Canada. And the last I heard, the man in the bear costume had never been caught. After escaping to Canada, I must have blocked everything out in my mind until today. I went to high school, met a wonderful girl named Julia, and we both graduated, got married, and had our own little baby, Connor. Fast forward to today, August 14th, 1999. For days, Connor, now only 6 years old, has told me countless times about the TV show he's been watching. He said that if you write to the address shown on the TV, you could go and play games with the host. I told him for days, up to this point, that it was out of the question, but eventually gave in and said to him, "Okay, next time the show's on, call and I'll come have a look." I wanted to at least see the show, if I was going to send my only son along. I just wanted to know what I was signing him up for. And sure enough, today he called me, and everything came flooding back. Dad, this is the show. Can I go?" Connor shouted in excitement. What I've been faced with shook me to my very core. On the screen was the guy in the bear costume, sitting in a chair, talking to the audience. "Hey kids, do you want to come visit my cellar? If you do, please write a letter to this address." The author has requested feedback on this story, since it was his first one. So if you guys are interested in telling there are trees, there's snow, and I'm lost. It doesn't matter how I got here. All that matters is survival. So I slowly press on through the eerie silence of the forest, doing my best to shut out the cold in my mind. No one's gonna save me but myself. My eyes are fixed on the frigid white desert in front of my feet, when a shadow flits across my vision, nearly making me stumble. I look up. Could this be a reason to hope? A distant airplane or a rescue helicopter? No, it's just another raven. It joins the others who have already gathered, all of them staring down at me from the surrounding tree limbs. They're watching in complete silence, as if captivated by the drama of my situation. This is their secret theater, and their favorite new actors giving a spellbinding performance. I lower my head, blow on my fingers, and lift one weary foot to take a step, and then another, and another, and another, until the process of moving forward on numbed feet becomes automatic, and my mind starts to wander. Smart birds, ravens. I remember someone once telling me that they have another name. What was it again? Wolf birds, wasn't it? Yes, I think that's right. Wolf birds, because of the way they sometimes track wolves. Ravens will patiently follow along from above and swoop down after the wolves make their kill, eager to share the carcass. And suddenly, my thoughts are interrupted as the ravens take to the air in a flurry of black wings and snow, as if they've all come to silent agreement. This particular drama has become boring. Once more I pause, wondering if they found something more interesting to watch. But no. They just keep circling overhead as I stare up at them. Soon, however, I hear growls. Growls that are very close and coming closer. In this moment, it dawns on me that if ravens are such smart birds, they might not always be satisfied with following along behind the wolves. Sometimes, they might let the wolves know what they want to eat.
That was a short ass story.
I bought a house across the street over the summer.
I was about to say.
And now that the leaves have started to fall, I have a clear view of the graveyard from my living room window. A week and a half ago, I saw something tall and white moving along the headstones. Something that glowed with dim light, even when it was pitch black out. I told Denise, who said, and I quote, "Well, that's pretty fucking cool." We started staying up late to see if it would come back. Thursday night, it did. Through the binoculars, I could see it was shaped more or less like an upside-down tree, It didn't have feet, but rather hundreds of small tendrils that shuffled it through the rows of headstones. Its body was erect and unremarkable, save for an opening at the top where different, longer tendrils hung. It moved silently, unceasingly for almost 20 minutes before disappearing into thin air. When I got to work on Friday, I told a couple guys about it, and they said I was full of shit, so I invited them over to see it for themselves. Dan was the only one who took me up on my offer, so I told him to come for dinner. We would eat and wait for the thing to show up. Around 1 a.m. on Saturday morning, it came back, and Dan was speechless. He took out his phone and started recording. I told him there was no point. It hadn't shown up on anything Denise and I had tried to record with, but he insisted on trying anyway. We were out on the front porch, so the thing was about 100 feet away, maybe more. Dan wasn't having much luck getting it in focus. So we crossed the street and stood on the edge of the cemetery property. I wouldn't go near it, Dan, Denise advised. Part of me agreed with her, but another part wanted to join him to get a better look. It's cool, Dan replied over his shoulder. He kept walking in its direction. I stayed on the porch with Denise and watched Dan get closer. Can you hear that? It sounds like it's singing or something. Neither of us could hear what Dan heard, but I was growing increasingly uneasy at his cavalier attitude in the face of something completely unknown. Before any of us could react, one of the tendrils from the top of the creature shot across the cemetery and whipped Dan in the face. I stumbled and fell back. Denise gasped, and I started to run towards my friend. The thing evaporated. I reached Dan, who had already gotten up. He looked no worse for wear. As we headed back for the house, Dan began to limp. He started to complain about a weird feeling in his feet. I helped him across the street and back into the house. He immediately took off his shoes and started to rub his heels and arches and toes. It was obvious he was in pain. Without warning, with a series of sickening wet cracks, Dan's feet split in half, and Denise screamed. And they split again and again. Denise fumbled with her phone to call 911, and I just watched, horrified, as Dan's feet continued to bifurcate, until there was nothing left but bleeding tendrils that jerked and twitched, flinging blood across the living room. Dan passed out, and as further bifurcations turned his feet into noodle-thin, then hair-thin filaments. I heard an ambulance approaching. We live only a quarter mile away from the hospital. The filaments nodded and unknotted. As the EMTs entered the house, they gazed, wide-eyed, at Dan's injuries. As they loaded him onto the gurney and began exiting the house, 2 cracks like gunshots rang out, making everyone jump. His shins, knees, and femurs had split. Blood poured down the sides of the gurney and cascaded down our front steps. Denise and I heard more cracks after the ambulance doors had closed. Then, with sirens blaring, they were gone. Dan died not long after. I attended his funeral this morning. There's no explanation for what happened to him. The news report on his death simply called it an accident. I want to come forward to tell the police what was going on in the cemetery, but the thing hasn't shown up at all since that night. If anyone else lives in Norwalk and can claim they've seen something like what I've described, please do so. Dan didn't deserve what happened to him. Denise painted a picture of what it looked like. She got it exactly right. Today is my turn at the bottom of the well. I stand up slowly, stiffly, bracing myself against the dark, slippery walls. I know what has happened. I know what is going to happen. I look up, and there she is, gripping the bricks at the top, staring down at me. She always stares, implacably, inhumanly. She does nothing to help me. She stares and stares as I yell, try to gain a foothold on the walls. I call her name. She does not respond as I slowly descend to stupor in the dank water at the bottom of the well. She stares. Her gaze does not falter. as I feel the agony of flesh slowly retreating from my bones and starve to death. Now I am at the top of the well. I look down, and there she is again, standing still, touching the slippery walls, staring up at me, implacably, inhumanly. So I call for help. I yell until my voice is hoarse. I try to do what I didn't do before. I try to make amends. I look for anything I can to throw down to help her. A rope, some food. Sometimes I find things, but they don't help. For as I throw them down, she doesn't see them. She refuses all rescue. And as she does so, I realize there will be no escape. And now it's my turn, at the bottom of the well. Tales of a Traveling Salesman, Chapter 1. Robert James Lohman. The bed seemed to have its own gravity this morning, pinning Robert's body to the dampness of the sheets. He had that dream again, the one that he always had, but could never remember the details of. Something about a house in the woods. Trees, definitely. A child, maybe? Robert shook the sleep from his head and swung his legs over the side of the bed. Today marked the beginning of month 2 of his unemployment. Every day that passed added more force to the pull of his bed. Robert felt useless to his wife. Thank God the kids were old enough to be out on their own. Holding his face in his hands, he took a deep breath, held it, and weakly whispered out, "Useless. What the hell am I going to do for work?" His wife got a job as a secretary at one of the offices nearby to keep income trickling in while he continued his search. A sad attempt to preserve their modest savings account they kept together. Her fake optimism and reassurances were painful to him. Each pat on the back made his soul heavier with the guilt. As a younger man, he never would have believed his life would get to the point where his wife would have to work out of necessity for the well-being of the family. Being a traveling salesman was very good to Robert. It put his son into college, and he was really great at it. Being able to find the good leads. New movie theater opening up in the city, he would find out about it and sell a package deal of vacuums instead of the typical one per household. Robert was good, and he had plenty of opportunities offered to him in the past for some companies that now have become much, much larger. He never took them, though, as he really enjoyed being a traveling salesman. He can never imagine being confined to a dreary office, shuffling papers state to state, city to city, door to door. You would expect someone who made a living meeting new people and getting them to like him quickly would actually enjoy the company of others. Sure, people were nice enough, but mostly, it was the traveling. The new scenery, the rolling landscapes passing by his car windows, the smells on the wind. Robert loved to travel, but he hadn't been able to travel much in the last several years. Traveling salesmen were well past being on the way out. People used to invite him in, offer food and water with a side of conversation. Towards the end, He was lucky to get someone to answer the door. Something had changed in the last 20 years. Or was it everything? It didn't matter anymore. No prospective employer was very impressed with a man who was just a salesman for that long. And when Robert tells them that it was by choice, he gets the smirk that just says, "Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night." And then comes the fake smile. Something Robert is very familiar with, after all those years pretending to like strangers. Useless. He'd never been so tired in all of his life. Standing from the bed and stretching, he pulled his shirt off of himself, soaked in the sweat from the night before. Not using the AC had been hard this summer. Each morning he woke up more tired than the day before. Whether or not the heat caused this or his depression, he didn't know. It was probably a little bit of both. He started to walk, but his head became heavy very suddenly, and his heartbeat boomed in his chest like a timpani drum. Vertigo setting in without warning. Robert went to lean against the wall nearby, but rested his hand on a frame painting where the sweat from his palm betrayed his stability, and he slipped, falling and bringing the picture with him to the ground. His jaw hit the hard carpet and shocked his head with an explosion of pain. The glass from the picture shattered all around him, like sharp snow. He laid there for longer than he needed, opened eyes, looking under the bed. Dust, old photos in a box, shadows of a happy past. Frustration set deep within his bones and gave way to anger. The kind one gets when they bump their head on a cabinet, mixed with that deeper anger one can have with life and themselves. "Honey, are you okay?" Why was his wife still here? She was supposed to be at work now. For some reason, this made Robert even angrier. He could not even keep this embarrassment private from her. Clumsy, stupid man. The inner Robert spoke. He felt sorry for his wife for marrying him. He felt sorry for his kids, since they had a failure of a father. This poor, clumsy man, laying on the ground in shame. Now he was angry at himself for moping. Robert sighed again, a dry wheeze ending in a labored cough, painful to hear. "I'm fine. I just tripped over my own feet again. Broke that picture you liked, though. I'm sorry." Silence. He began picking up the pieces of the glass from the carpet, and he glanced at the picture. A landscape of rolling hills and mountains. It was Linda's favorite. Naturally, it was her favorite. Naturally, it had a piece of glass piercing it right down the middle. She gasped when she opened the door and saw it. "My favorite. Oh, I love that painting. It was an original gift from my father." He looked up at her, like a dog looks up when it knows it did something wrong. "I'm sorry, Lynn. Really am. I just got dizzy. And Lord, Robert, as if things weren't bad enough already. You couldn't have just fallen differently?" Robert looked defeated. God, he wanted to get away. "I'm sorry. It was an accident. I'll get a new frame soon. I'll go into the city today and try to find a new frame." She looked at him hard, with a stern eye that mothers can summon. They both knew they couldn't exactly splurge on a new frame. "And a job. I will find one today, Lynn. I can tell today will be different." Never in all of his life had he ever lied like this, not even to get a sale. He did not believe any of these words, and couldn't believe they came from him. But Linda believed that he believed them, and a smile found its way to her face. "Let me help you clean that up. Breakfast is on the table. I took today off so I could try to cheer you up." And this pained him. He was already such a burden, and she did all this for me. Robert felt like a cheat somehow, like he fooled this nice woman, beautiful and dignified, to continue to love him. He walked slowly through their house, into the dining room, and sat down. Eggs over easy, and toast perfectly tanned, lightly buttered, bacon crisp to perfection, Coffee, black, with cream, waiting to be used in a cute little cup with a tiny little handle.
Fucking saving is being ridiculous, dude.
Any other morning,
I'm gonna probably just turn off autosave. That's fucking just
for some
more
reason,
of a hassle.
he felt sick. A fiery heat burned in his head and his torso. His legs were cool and felt filled with jam. He pushed his chair away and left his food untouched. He had to leave. He had to go, now. He had to do something. Anything to get out of the house, away from his poor wife. Tears fell silently as he went into the laundry room and changed, pulling his scratchy suit over his aching body that moved on its own. He forced himself to run out into the car, suitcase with only resumes in it tucked under his left arm, keys in his right. Robert slammed the car door and started the car as fast as possible. He absolutely had to get away before he was forced to see his wife's confused, questioning face. She won't understand, but I've got to be alone right now. Anywhere but here. I can't face this anymore. I can't face her, especially. Oh my god, what have I done? I lost my job. I'll lose my house soon if I can't fix this. My poor wife must suffer for my mistakes. I can't bear this anymore. I have nothing to give and nothing to share. Even being around me has been hard on her. I've been short-tempered and rude when she's been nice and accommodating, trying so hard to keep me happy despite all of this. Working a job in addition to the housework. God, I really am terrible. I need to get away. Robert drove for a little while, heading towards the city. Maybe he could pull himself together and try to get an interview. After all, the day was still young, but the tears just would not stop. The road blurred in front of him as he sped, passing cars when he could. One car, a sedan. The next, a pickup with a fantastic sky blue finish. Then a truck carrying chickens. His engine struggled to keep up with his desire for speed, chugging around the big truck as the road curved to the right. He'd never passed in a no-pass zone before, not in all of his life. The city came into view, and slowly began to surround him with its buildings and its heat. Finding a decent place to put his car, he parked it on the side of the road next to the public park, filled with trees, an open field, and a small lake. His only little secret was coming here each morning, and taking a nap after the drive before making his rounds. There was a nice spot under a large oak tree, at least 100 years old and flanked on one side by tall bushes. This place afforded a reasonable amount of privacy and plenty of shade. The hill rolled down beneath this spot, offering a view of the park that he thought was the best. He had calmed down, but his heart was still pounding. Is this a way enough for you, mister? Robert thought to himself. A small chuckle escaped his dour face as he rubbed his chin. He forgot to shave this morning. He couldn't go into any interviews like this. Another chuckle. He could not even feel angry anymore. Robert had calmed down, and seemingly had resigned himself to this wretched turn of fate. How many naps could he take in a day? How many dreams? A grand experiment. Oh, Robert, what have you done? What will you do?
I literally just turned off.
Bring stability back.
Fucking kidding me?
How will you provide?
It literally just saved, and it's fucking saving again.
Sleep for a little bit. Anxiety, my old friend, just for a little. Robert stretched out his legs in the cool grass and crossed his arms over his chest like a child pulls a blanket around itself.
And of course.
Besides, and how don't you know this? My friends call me RJ. A mere 4 years ago, I was in a rough patch and working part-time at an old thrift store just a few miles from where I lived. I was the only employee other than the owner himself. The owner was a small elderly man with little to no family. And now that I think about it, he never mentioned if he had one. He kept to himself, but was always very nice to anyone he met, including me. His name was Dan. I'm pretty sure that wasn't his real name, but I didn't care to ask. Dan took me in when I didn't have much, and felt like I would do anything for him. He didn't have much either, since the clientele at the thrift store wasn't exactly poppin', and the store gave a very down-at-the-creek type vibe, and was apparently built from the owner's bare hands. Or so he said. He was old, but didn't give the impression of being a man of physical labor. I didn't question it. From time to time, things would break and doors would fall off their hinges, and I would do my best to put them back together. This place was no doubt showing its age, but it felt like home. The first thing one would notice about the store is its unique existence among the wild. I mean, with no exaggeration, the store was surrounded by miles and miles of trees and would often feel desolate. We had our regulars who would stop by, but other than that, foot traffic was bleak. Dan would usually work the mornings up to noon, and me, the second half, which usually meant closing the store by myself. And then one night, I wouldn't say I was necessarily afraid of the dark, but when closing shop, I felt a heightened awareness around me. I felt like something was watching. I just didn't know what. And by then, the sun was long gone, and all I could see was the dark outline of the towering trees. I didn't actually experience anything crazy, but I knew something was off. I brushed it off, and got in my car and drove off. Trying to sleep that night was a bitch. And tossing and turning, I felt a migraine rushing in like a destructive tsunami. I took some pain medication, then quickly dozed off into a dream. The dream was visceral. All I could see were swarms of vibrant colors swirling and swishing around, moving like mists against the wind. And suddenly my dream shifted. I was back at the thrift store. There I was, standing in front of this old but all too familiar thrift store. The night was as dark as can be, but my ears were numb from a chilling freeze. Directly behind the building sat a ginormous presence. In fact, the thing was colossal. I trembled, hardly able to speak, not knowing exactly what to say. I gave a very hesitant hello. Then without warning, this beast, the size of a 20-30-story building, starts flapping its wings and sends me flying on my ass, jetting its massive body straight up into the air. It began to hover over me, wings flapping with tremendous force, making it hard to breathe. I tried to grip the ground as best I could, but I was no match for this destructive force, causing me to glide every which way. I surrendered, and I could tell you, I remember very little beyond that. I wake up the next morning, still left thinking about what exactly I just experienced. It must have been the meds, I tell myself. One thing I did notice is that my ears were still freezing. Odd, considering we're in the middle of July. I didn't get a call from Dan shortly after.
Hey, I was wondering if you could cover the whole day for me at the store.
I pause.
Is something wrong, Dan?
He hesitates.
No.
Dan quickly spurts in an egregious manner.
Sure, I'll cover the day.
The phone clicks. Dan hangs up. What was that about? Maybe he's coming down with the same illness as me. Either way, I'm left with an added nauseousness to my stomach. I then head off for the store. On the way to the store, I was honestly still thinking about the strange encounter I had with Dan over the phone. I'm pretty much wondering if he was okay and all. Minutes fly by, and hours pass. Everything starts to seem standard for the better half of the day, which was a major relief considering I was still feeling uneasy when I had arrived. And then, an hour before closing time, I take the liberty of playing some of my favorite tunes, ranging from Johnny Cash to Pink Floyd. The classics. Dan would not approve, but, what the hell, I thought. Finally thinking my day was gradually improving, my music cuts out from the overhead speakers. Static begins to intrude. The fuck? All I can say is that what happened next changed everything. To this day, I'm still left a bit dumbfounded. Nervously twirling my right thumb against my index finger, I began to inspect the store, cautiously walking, looking for anything that may be out of the normal. Suddenly, the overhead speakers begin to project a strange sound, alien by most human standards. It's beautiful, to say the least. The sound began to shift in frequencies, as if dancing across the thrift store's creaky walls in elegance. I could feel it all across my body. I'm left in a daze, unable to speak. I spend hours standing in one place. At one point, I remember the room turning purple, as if standing directly under a blacklight. My eyes watering, I began to feel warmth shooting through my veins. No doubt emanating from the constant movement of these shifting frequencies. Unable to move, I began floating in a standing position, about 5 inches from the ground. I feel a presence shifting behind me, but I don't feel scared. I close my eyes, my body now spinning in a clockwise motion. I hear a voice behind my ear softly whisper something I couldn't comprehend. I give a loud gasp. I tried to open my eyes, but I couldn't. It felt like my body was distorting and glitching as these loud sonic waves began pulsating and bouncing across the room. Whispering in my ear again, I hear, "We are here for him. He was not wise. He deceived us." I tried to respond, but it was of no use. "You may not understand at the moment, and surely this will pass." Confused, I could only cry out in agony. "We made a deal, but he did not hold. We have appeared before him, but choose you as his pawn." I then hear silence for what felt like an eternity. Again, whispering, "He was not wise. He deceived us. He ran. There's no running when you are nil." I felt like crying at this point, and I did, and then felt my chest thumping as a swift burst of air came racing down my lungs. I gasped, "We will disperse, but before we do..." Feeling my voice come back, I cry out, "Who are you?" And it responds, "We are what matters. We are everything. We will disperse, but before we do..." It pauses for a few moments. "We would like to extend you an offer. We will share the meaning of all of this. This thing, the secret of all of this. This thing you call life. We will give the meaning of life to you at a price." At this point, I'm still unable to see and willing to do just about anything I ask. A very defeated, "How?" I hear silence for a few moments. "With your life, we will share with you the meaning of life. We will give you a moment to absorb this revelation. And then we will take what is ours." Still confused and unable to process what is being said to me, I cry out, "I just want to go home. Please. I want nothing to do with this. I just want to go home." "Very well," it tells me. Suddenly, the pulsating stops. My eyes open. It was night out, and the store was in complete darkness. Hardly able to breathe, I stumble outside and race into my car. I need to get the fuck out of here. And 4 years have passed since then. I still can't explain what happened to me that night. I even tried calling Dan that night when I got home, but the line went straight to voicemail. No one knows where Dan went, and I honestly question whether he's still alive. Upon doing a quick Google search, it seems that the building where I once worked is no longer there. All I can say is that I value my life so much more after that night. even if I don't know the meaning behind it. He deceived us. I tried to respond, but it was of no use. You may not understand at the moment, and surely this will pass. Confused, I could only cry out in agony. We made a deal, but he did not hold. We have appeared before him, but choose you as his pawn. I then hear silence for what felt like an eternity. Again, whispering, he was not wise. He deceived us. He ran.
Decimating these, so the file's big. It was almost at 45 million. It's at 42 now.
Thank you for your concern and replies. The fact that I'm not alone and have your support means the world. I can't answer all the questions, but I will say this. Some of you are right. You suspected and anticipated some of what has happened. Unfortunately, not to the extent that any of us could have dreamed. I'm not sure what to make of the past couple days. Our journey took a day. I wasn't allowed outside throughout the trip, so I never really got my bearings. When we reached our destination, I finally understood where we were. The desert, dry air, an oppressive heat. It had to be Arizona. It's the closest site to one in Colorado. As I was led outside with Eldridge by guards in gray and red, I saw the large semis being unloaded across the tarmac in the distance. The facility the blocks were being moved into was enormous, but bland. It looked like those buildings you see every other semi docked, where they drop off and receive cargo. I saw noticeably less movement in the blocks as they were transported inside. The compound the facility was on was enormous. The walk to where they held me was somewhat long, so I tried to take it in as much as I could. To the west were two large buildings that appeared to be built for holding cargo. This included the one where the blocks were being stored. To the east was an industrial park. Parking lots, 3-story buildings, medians with cacti and red stone. It looked remarkably ordinary. Cars littered the lots. I saw the logo for Axiom X on the walls of these buildings. To the north was desert, bleak and empty. The south was the same except for the black vein of road cutting through it. The whole compound was fenced in. The poles of the fence were thicker than your average fence pole, and they were topped with brass globes. I was taken to a large, flat, 1-story building. Air conditioners chugged quietly in a line along the wall. Once inside, I realized these were living quarters. The guards stopped inside the doors, and I saw sweat beading their foreheads. I had to go through a security checkpoint where my phone and computer were taken. Eldridge beckoned to me to follow him down a series of hallways and showed me to room 250. It wasn't anything impressive. A single bed, a desk, sparse bathroom, and a dresser. No TV, but there was a stiff and scratchy armchair in the corner if I had the urge to sit back and read for a while. Could you explain to me what's going on? I dropped my bags and sat on the bed. I felt sticky with the sheen of sweat covering my skin. I hadn't changed my clothes since Friday. Eldridge made sure the door was closed and turned to me. You technically broke into a government quarantine, interacted closely with individuals inside the quarantine. This, he gestured to the room, is more than others would have gotten. I tried to contain my scoff. Is this because I made it out that night untouched? Is that what this is? Because if it is, you know why. My dad warned me in time somehow. There's nothing special about me other than I was lucky enough to get to a car in time. I realize that. But there are others that see potential in you. He paused for a moment. Back in the early 90s, there was a lack of congressional funding to the Ed, which resulted in a substantial amount of contractual work with Oxium. The technological advances Oxium made were leaps and bounds beyond what government scientists were producing. The committees involved in the Ed were happy to hear this. Over time, more control was given to the company, and by 1999, all 5 facilities were running with Oxium-created equipment and staffed largely by Oxium scientists and staff. Congress and the governmental side of the Ed still have a hand in things, but Oxium-backed congressmen and women have slowly begun to become more prominent in those committees. The operation of the Ed has slowly come more into the control of Oxium. The government is still extremely tight-lipped about everything, but I haven't heard of anyone's hackles rising because of this shift in the power dynamic. He stopped to rub his eyes. Maybe it was decided by the powers that be, but this is too much of a liability for the government to handle, or that it's not worth the time and money any longer. What I'm trying to tell you is that you're of great interest to Oxium now, regardless of what I report to them or the government. What happens next is largely out of my hands now. I felt hot, waxy fear drip down my back. I couldn't stop it from happening. A wash of self-pity came over me. I wondered how the hell this had all happened. I'd lost so much in such a short time. It would have been hard to describe, but I imagine it's similar to what people might feel when natural disasters strike. You lose your home, sometimes your families, your pets, your assets, everything. You're left with what you had on your back. Life experiences and intelligence may account for something, but the sheer emptiness of the loss of your physical life is beyond my ability to describe. Sitting in that dingy motel-like room drove it all home clearly to me. I had no home, and I felt as if I wasn't even regarded as a person any longer, but more a pawn in the overall scheme of things. As if I had some special abilities, some special immunity that they could tease out of me. I know the trope of the sinister corporation is tired, but what Eldridge described to me about the shift in control over the Ed really upset me. So I'm to sit here and wait on them until they're ready with whatever they have to test me or something? I didn't choose any of this. I was lucky enough that my father somehow came to me. Now, here I am, days later, waiting on the whims of people who know nothing about me except the truths I've told you, yet they don't want to believe what I've said. I can't stay here. You can't leave. He stood up straight. You can't leave the compound. They won't let you. Even if you did leave, the fence I saw you eyeing means protection. Being outside of it is dangerous. His phone buzzed. I have to go, he said suddenly. You'll be issued a laptop soon. I think you'll find a notebook and your pen in your bag. Don't stop recording and don't stop writing. He pulled a small bag from his back pocket. It was black and pill-shaped, roughly the size of his palm. Eldridge placed it on the bureau. Your access card is on the outside porch. 2 of the scientists, Parsons and Chambry, have asked that you report to Facility 1 at 9:30 tomorrow morning. I advise you to make it a priority to get there. He unzipped the pouch and produced a contact lens case. Before you go, put these in your eyes. Oxium developed them. They allow you to see the manifestations. They react with the heat in your eyes and bend the light to such an extent that you can see where manifestations are at any given time. Don't keep them in too long, though. 2 hours max is pushing it. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you're here. I never expected this turn of events. Maybe I did on some level. I could have kept you out of Glenwood when we saw you approaching. This story is just too important. Then why not write it yourself? You're using me to get this bullshit out in the open. I have trouble swallowing your supposed altruism when I'm the one living this and telling others about it. Eldridge's face grew red at that. I have to live with myself and my past. Bigger things are in motion at this point. My credibility is compromised by my association with this. Your voice is pure and untouched. So yes, I am using it. I'm not asking you to overlook that. Be disgusted with me. I'd welcome it. I'd be shocked if you weren't. Once you get there, you'll see the extent of things. He turned and left abruptly. I didn't look at the contacts or the access card. I laid on the bed and looked at the ceiling. My body and mind were tired. I wanted to shower, but felt too exhausted to move. After a few minutes, I fell asleep. In my dream, I was laying in bed, just as I was when I drifted off to sleep. The lights were off, and the silence was so complete my ears felt like they were ringing. There was a weight on my bed, other than my own. To my right, facing the wall, was a dark figure with its back towards me. It was still, but in the same position my dad was when I had found him in the bedroom at Glenwood. I didn't move, and I barely breathed. The figure started to slowly roll towards the tight space between the bed and the wall, and I knew a full rotation would reveal its face. Although I wanted to shut my eyes, I couldn't. It fell suddenly into the tight space. I didn't see its face. My dream self had no reaction. Then I saw two long-fingered hands, smoky and black, grip the edge of the bed and began to pull it towards the ground. My side of the bed tilted up as the hands pulled down. A head began to rise above the edge of the comforter. It was shorter than a human head and charcoal gray. It only had a mouth that was open and possibly wide. My body began to give into the gravity and slide down the bed. Suddenly the bed was the size of a parking lot, and I was the size of an ant. The open mouth was huge, an empty, gaping maw. I fell towards the mouth. As my body rolled over the hot, steaming gums, I jerked violently in my sleep. I woke up suddenly, then in a panic, crawling off the bed frantically. I backed up against the window. It was dark out, except for the lights illuminating the outside parking lot. I breathed heavily as I stared at the space between the bed and the wall. Eventually, I got the nerve to check the space.
I'll be right back. I gotta go to the door.
I left the lights on the whole night while I wrote. Yeah, I'm gonna stop here. I'll post more soon.
Alright, Chad, sorry about that. And the video's finished too. I'm like, don't like the way I'm doing my faces. I feel like my first set of faces I was learning are better, but still not what I want. So I've been like struggling with that. And my phone's acting up again. New emergency alert message, part 4. Which these were like all in together. They're like a few down before.
Welcome to the Dark Somnium. This story is by the Reddit user Jason Dalton, titled Warning, Don't Go In to Black Star Canyon. If you're currently living in Southern
Gotta fix her
California,
nose still.
do not go into Black Star Canyon. I'm posting this here because I know you guys have a fascination with the supernatural and other generally creepy things. If you read nothing else in this post, I want you to at least know not to go there. I'm beginning to become convinced it's really dangerous. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Black Star Canyon is a popular trail in Orange County, California. If you live in the area, you know what I'm talking about. It's commonly known as the most haunted place in the entire state. Even skeptics like me get creeped out about the canyon. If you're looking for a place with a bad history, this is it. In the 1800s, settlers massacred the native Shoshone tribe living there. On top of that, there were several notorious murders committed in the canyon during the gold rush days, the most famous being the killing of James M. Gregg. That's not all. The place has a history with secret KKK meetings, cult meetings, and even relatively recently a bus of school children was accidentally run off the road, falling into the canyon where all the passengers perished. The bus is still there today. So, Indian burial ground, check. Occult meetings, check. School tragedy, check. I'm serious, you can Google all of this if you want to know more. There's even rumors of a man who will shoot you if you go too close to his property. During the day, it's a popular hiking spot. It's got bike paths, a cool waterfall, the works. At night, it becomes something entirely different. Just because of all the rumors, more reasonable people stay away. And high schoolers and college students mostly come just to do stupid dares with their friends. Haunted or not, generally a good idea to steer clear at night. I've only been a few times. Normally, I take all the rumors with a giant grain of salt. I'm not really one for superstition. Though, at night, even without the ghost stories, the place is chilling. Because of the way the canyon is shaped, you can hear a pin drop. It's so quiet. Until the wind. When a gust of wind blows, it howls like you've never heard. So, why am I telling you all this? Last night was my last time going there. I'll just tell you what happened. That's the only way to do it justice, really. Because it's about Halloween time, my friends and I got the idea to go down into the canyon at night, mostly just for the chills. We decided to walk down to the old school bus, so we drove down to the mouth of the trail, where there's a big rusted gate to stop any cars from driving further. We parked, got out, and climbed under the gate to continue on to the trail. We were a group of 3 college guys, so we weren't too worried about anyone trying to mess with us. We began to walk down the main trail with our flashlights towards the school bus. I'd actually never been that far into the canyon before, but I wasn't at all scared. We mostly joked, threw rocks into nearby bushes to freak each other out. Everything was going pretty well, until we actually got to the bus. As we got further and further into the canyon, the air got colder and colder. The wind started howling. Except this time, it was way colder than usual. I had to tuck my arms in between my sides to keep warm. Our breath became visible and cloudy in the air, which is pretty rare in October in California. But we kept pressing on. We weren't going to let the wind and cold spook us out this far in. We finally could see the bus from a distance with our flashlights. It's tipped over against a tree,
grown over with weeds and heavily graffitied. We all had the chills. Knowing the story and standing there in the pitch dark was frightening for anyone. We all just stood there, looking at the corpse of an old school bus. None of us really had much to say. When we had enough of it, we turned back. That's when the night started to go sour. We had made our way far enough from the bus.
I gotta fix the part right there to see in her torso piece.
I could hear moaning. It sounded like kids trying to grasp for air. We assumed it was the wind and kept walking until a bright light started blinking. It was like it was coming from the headlights of the bus, only that was impossible. The headlights had been gone for years. At this point, we decided someone was messing with us, but we didn't want to find out. My two friends urged me to keep walking, but I felt pulled to the bus. The noises coming from the area were drawing me in. I wanted to leave, with every bone in my body, but I felt physically compelled to go back. The headlights kept flashing. On, off, on, off. It was hypnotizing. I don't even know how to properly describe it. Eventually I snapped out of it and began walking much more quickly back to the car with my friends. No one was talking. What were those lights? In my mind, I rationalized that it was probably some other kids with flashlights, but
You have to reduce some parts of her
as we
skirt
got about
thing.
halfway back to the car, I noticed someone following us from the distance. What looked like a man was standing about 100 yards behind us, motionless. I guess he must have been a jogger or someone out for a late night run, but I knew that wasn't true. I didn't tell my friends about him. We were all creeped out enough and he wasn't threatening us. But every time I looked behind me, it seemed he had inched closer to us. I tried to ignore him. And finally, I could see the car again. I just wanted to get back. When we had finally made it, my friends began to climb into the car. When they noticed the man too, now he was standing right at the edge of the gate. It was too dark to see any of his features, but I took a few steps forward with my flashlight and asked him if he needed something from us. When my light hit him, I froze. He looked nearly identical to me. Same hair, same face, same clothes, only a little taller and sickly looking, like a real-life doppelganger. He was giving me the 1,000-meter stare. His dead-looking eyes locked right onto mine. I slowly backed away and ran back to the car. I didn't even know what to say to my friends. I just saw myself, or did I? I just told them everything was okay, but we should probably get going. They sped out back onto the streets, and even though we had gotten our distance from the doppelganger, I still didn't feel totally safe. I've heard lots of rumors about the things that happen in Black Star Woods. This phenomenon was new to me. But that's not even the weirdest part. When I came home from class this evening,
This is taking a good minute.
It was from my ex. She lives in a town called Koto de Kaza. We hadn't talked in months, so it was kind of weird. The message read, "Hey, what were you doing in Koto last night?" Yeah, here's the thing. I wasn't. I'm debating filing a police report. I haven't responded to the message yet. The thing I want is other people to get involved. I'm just not sure though. I don't even know if I'm perceiving everything right. All I do know is don't go into those woods. I hope this is all over. I'll update you if anything develops. I hope you like this video. And if you like my narrations, be sure to like and subscribe so I can spend more time creating narrations and music for you. Have a good night. Welcome to the Dark Somnium. This story is titled Ethan's Halloween Mask. My cousin Ethan and I grew up together, but I never liked him very much. His family was rich, so he always had the best stuff. Mine wasn't. I didn't. On Halloween, 1985, we were going trick-or-treating together. I was the Terminator, and he was Freddy Krueger. His mask cost almost $100, and it looked exactly like Freddy's face. The scars, the sneer, everything was just right, and I didn't have a mask. My parents couldn't afford one. I had torn aluminum foil taped to the side of my face. It was meant to look like the Terminator after some of his skin had been ripped off. A few splotches of ketchup on the foil were supposed to look like blood. As soon as it dried, it looked very little like dried blood, and very much like dried ketchup. Despite my terrible costume, I was still excited to trick-or-treat. We didn't have candy very often at home, except maybe on Easter. My parents encouraged me to go to as many houses as possible, as I wanted to get all the candy I'd be able to eat. It felt good to know they wanted me to be happy. Ethan and I went out at sundown and visited house after house. Every time, the homeowners would gush over Ethan's mask. They'd tell him how scary he was, how realistic. Then they'd turn to me and ask who I was supposed to be. I'd answer, and they'd say something like, "Oh, of course. How could I have missed it?" I could tell they felt sorry for me. One even handed me a few extra pieces of candy. When we were done, our pillowcases stuffed with treats of every sort, we began the long walk home. As we went, Ethan rooted around his bag of loot. I could hear him grumbling and complaining through the mask. Then he started throwing candy on the street, stuff he didn't like.
Go ahead and pick it up if you want it,
He
Bill.
called out,
I know you can't afford to let anything go to waste.
heaving handful after handful into the gutter. I didn't say anything, but I reached into my pocket and pulled out the lighter and one of the 2 cigarettes I'd stolen from my dad. I'd been smoking on and off for the last few months, and even at 13, I knew it was bad for me. I just didn't care. It made me feel good. I stayed a few steps behind Ethan as he tossed more candy away, and as much as I hated myself for it, I ended up picking a few pieces off the ground and putting them in my bag. Ethan caught me once and laughed.
You're gonna be as fat as your mom if you eat all that.
I kept my mouth shut.
Is that why she got fired from the restaurant? Did she eat a customer's food?
I knew Ethan was joking. He did it often. I'm sure in his mind, he thought he was being harmless and playful. Still, I told him more than a few times to leave Mom out of the jokes. She had diabetes, and she hadn't mentioned it to anyone other than my dad and me, but the doctor told her that she might end up losing her foot. That's why the restaurant let her go. She couldn't walk around and wait tables anymore. "Change the subject, Ethan," I said. I knew he heard me. He didn't talk for another minute or so, until he did again.
You think her and your dad still fuck? I wonder how he manages to get it in there.
He cackled, then insisted.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm done. Promise.
I seethed as we took a shortcut through the elementary school soccer field.
Let's stop here for a minute.
Ethan said, and we got into the school's playground.
I bet I could scare the shit out of some kids if they come by.
He sat on one of the swings with his pillowcase in his lap. He kicked his legs, and the swing moved back and forth. I stood there, hating him. "I think I see some kids coming over the hill," I told Ethan. "I'm going to hide behind the slide and sneak up on them if they come over to you."
Go for it.
Ethan told me, his voice deep and distorted through the mask. I left Ethan on the swing and walked over to the slide. I watched him swing as his hateful words rang in my ears. Tears came to my eyes as I remembered Mom smiling from her spot on the couch, and she encouraged me to go out and have fun. She was such a good person. So good. She never said anything negative about Ethan. In fact, she'd always complimented him on his grades and his wins in baseball and even his looks. "You're going to be a handsome man, Ethan," she told him. "I bet we'll see your face in a magazine someday." Even after her kindness, Ethan still felt it was okay to trash her. I heard him laughing to himself from across the playground. I didn't know why exactly, but I had a pretty good idea. I reached into my jacket for the other cigarette, knowing the smoke would calm me down, but it had come apart. My pocket was full of loose tobacco and paper. Loose tobacco, paper, and the lighter. Ethan was still laughing as I fingered the lighter in my pocket for a second, and then pulled it out, walking up behind him. He didn't know I was there as he shouted out,
Okay, one more thing, and I'll never say anything about her again, but unless your dad's got a big dick, he'll never manage to...
I flicked the lighter near the back of Ethan's neck, right where the hair and the mask met. The hair went up quickly, using his hairspray as an accelerant. Then something happened that I didn't expect. The mask burst into flames. Ethan jumped off the swing and ran in a loose circle, trying to pull the mask off his head. I saw it ripping under his fingers. He couldn't get a grip. The material bubbled. His screams, barely muffled as the molten chemicals clung to his skin, echoed off the brick walls of the elementary school. After a few seconds, he fell and rolled around on the playground, pushing his head into the sand to put out the fire. And he succeeded, but the damage was done. He turned over on his back, no longer screaming, but gasping in shallow, hyperventilated breaths. I saw the mask was completely fused to what remained of his skin. One of his eyes had already burst, and the other darted around, almost like he was confused and wondering where he was. I saw something moving on the other side of the field. Kids were coming. I yelled to them to call an ambulance, and I waited, unsure how I felt, until the paramedics got there. I took complete responsibility for setting Ethan on fire. I said I'd been sneaking up to scare him by flicking the lighter near his face. And yes, I got in a lot of trouble, but everyone believed it was an accident. Ethan's face was destroyed. He had skin grafts and bone grafts and all sorts of reconstructive surgery. He never recovered. Not physically. Not emotionally. He killed himself in 1990. His parents held a very expensive funeral. I was invited. They'd forgiven me for my part in his accident years before. In fact, their subsequent lawsuit against the mask company is the reason why Halloween masks are now made of flame-resistant materials. Mom died a few years before Ethan, but not before complications from her diabetes took her left leg. Dad and I were with her in the hospital. At the same time, Ethan's parents were there to see him through another round of reconstructive surgery. They visited Mom, Dad, and I while Ethan was still under, recovering after a successful set of grafts. We chatted for a little while about Mom's hopes for recovery. Then the topic moved to Ethan. Ethan's mom was gushing about a plastic surgeon that had recently joined the hospital after working in Switzerland. He was the best, apparently. He'd taken on Ethan's case earlier in the year, albeit remotely, and wrote a substantial article about the new techniques he'd be employing. In the world of plastic surgery, it made a big splash, if only for its ambitions. Ethan's mom reached into her purse and pulled out the publication. She flipped it open to a page that showed various photographs of Ethan's burns and the notes and explanations the surgeon had written to accompany the article. I could tell Mom was holding back tears. I knew why, too. Her eyes met mine, and she couldn't hold back any longer. She began to weep. Dad and Ethan's mother held her while she cried, and I just watched. Mom was thinking that she'd been right all those years ago. She'd been right for all the wrong reasons, but right nonetheless, just like she'd predicted. Ethan's face finally made it into a magazine. I hope you enjoyed this narration, and if you like my videos, be sure to like and subscribe so I can spend more time creating narrations and music for you. Have a good night. Welcome to the Dark Somnium. This story is by the author, Decomposed, titled, Dress Me Like a Clown. Unless you live under a rock, you no doubt have seen the rash of stories about crazed clowns on the loose, terrorizing people and generally sending the US into an upheaval. This isn't a story about one of those clowns. This is a story about my childhood friend, Mr. Pogo, and how he helped me through one of the most tumultuous periods of my life. The day I met Mr. Pogo, it was my best friend Maisie's 9th birthday party. The most I can remember is colors. It was the first time I'd ever seen them. I've always been a very visual person, but for the first 8 years of my life, I only saw the world in shades of black, white, and gray. I was diagnosed with color blindness when I was 5, just after starting kindergarten. It didn't affect me much. When you don't know something, you can't really miss it. Macy's parents had gone all out this year. They invited our whole grade from school. Got a massive cake, pony rides, and even a clown. When I asked my dad, he agreed to bring me, albeit somewhat begrudgingly. Dad didn't like to leave the house a whole lot anymore. Ever since Mom had left a few months ago, and he'd lost his job, he'd changed. Now, he was always tired, always drinking, and not just a beer with dinner anymore. And he was always angry, blurry-eyed, sour. He was hurting. On the way to the party, we were both silent. The radio droned on in the background, and I fidgeted nervously in my seat, watching gray shadows flit past the window in a blur of same-looking shapes. I sighed deeply and could clearly hear Dad's hands tightening against the leather covering the steering wheel. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his white-knuckled grip, the tensity of his jaw. The heat radiating off him was something I could almost feel. I dropped my chin to my chest and absently brushed a hand against the deep bruise that blossomed overnight on my shoulder. It hurt. I winced. I didn't make another sound the rest of the drive. The second I saw Maisie, she ran up and jumped me with a big hug. I tried as hard as I could not to yelp, biting my lip, but a whimper still managed to slip out under my breath. She instantly backed off, worry flooding her eyes. I shifted my weight and could feel her gaze roving my body. It instinctively stopped on my shoulder, and she gave me the same look she always did. We're only kids, but she was still smart beyond her years. And she knew. We sang happy birthday. Maisie opened her presents. I'd gotten her, with help from my dad, the newest Polly Pocket dream house. Those things were all the rage back then. And we all stuffed our faces with cake. Then Mr. Pogo came on, and I felt the entire world shift. From somewhere I couldn't pinpoint, music started to gently bleat, a deep, crunchy calliope, sounding like it was being filtered through an echo chamber. I whipped around, trying to make sense of the direction. Suddenly, as if from thin air, a figure in a brightly colored costume somersaulted into view and jumped up with a small pop. I thought my eyes were on fire. I thought the world was ending. I didn't know exactly what I was seeing, but I knew it was color. A flurry of alien shapes exploded across my vision. I somehow knew all their names. With my breath caught in my throat, I watched the strange man dance in a wide circle across the grass, tapping kids on the head with a felt flower, yellow and green. His wide-legged pants, red, blue, white, gently flapping in the wind. Bells, golden and silver, threaded into them and jingled softly. The calliope music swelled louder and louder. I felt like I was caught in a merry-go-round of sound and light. The man pulled a handful of long, thin balloons, a veritable rainbow, out of his pocket, red, and began inflating them, twisting them into animals of all shapes and sizes. Blue dolphins, red birds, yellow giraffes rained down on us, and we all clapped in wonder. And for the first time, I tore my eyes away from the clown and looked around me, expecting to see a brand new world, and was shocked to find that beyond him, or what he was touching, my newfound colors disappeared. It was as though there was some phantom vacuum waiting, hungry and greedy, licking them up as soon as they left his body. He flipped by me, gracing Maisie's arm with one white-gloved finger, and for a second, I saw that her dress lit up with a bright blue. Her eyes widened, cradling a soft brown. For the rest of his performance, I sat, entranced, watching the traces of color sing across Maisie's backyard, following the clown wherever he went. Then, he was done. He left. and the colors left with him. Disappointed and reeling just the slightest, I decided to take a short walk to the back of the house while Macy's mom set up a party game. The forest that fed into the yard was vast and thick, and I'd spent quite a few lazy summer days camped out there, swapping dumb jokes and ghost stories with my friend. As I reached the edge of the tree line, I heard a faint, familiar jingling sound. The clown stood about 10 feet behind me, and the colors had returned, swirling through his clothes, bouncing back and forth on his heels. He reached into his pocket and produced another balloon. This one was purple. He floated over to me, inflating it and twisting it as he went, and offered it to me fully formed. A small figure sat on his palms. It looked like a child curled up, its arms over its face. Unsure of what to say, I took the gift and stared into his eyes. They were black. Not just the pupil, but the iris as well. Underneath them, large red fans made up the curve of his cheek, dotted with a yellow scatter of stars. Finally, I managed to stammer out a quiet, "Thank you." A flourish of the hand responded. I watched as it curved and dipped in the air, making its way closer to me. I felt frozen, not by fear, but rather by the sense of comfort I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt warm as the gloved hand came to rest on my shirt. I knew I should run. I knew I should shout for an adult. Everything in me screamed go, remembering the safety lessons they taught us at school. Stranger danger PSAs flashed through my head like massive billboards, but something told them to hush, that this was all right. I moved my collar aside, revealing a galaxy of bruises, not just the fresh ones from last night, but the littered remnants of their cousins from the last few months. I looked down, and for the first time, saw my own colors, splotchy purple, fresh, sickly yellow. I felt disgusting. I took a step backwards and stumbled, landing in the dirt. His hand fluttered away, up to his mouth, and covered it with a dramatic flare. I blinked, and he was suddenly standing over me, hand outstretched. Hesitantly, I took it and felt something cold and hard touch my fingers. He pulled me up, leaving the object in my hand, and made a show of brushing my shirt off, doing a dance in a tight circle before turning and bounding away. In my palm sat a small metal buzzer, the kind you would get in a joke shop to shock people with. As he disappeared around the corner of the house, the world going gray once more, I could hear my dad calling for me. He sounded upset. Without thinking, I shoved the buzzer into my pocket, feeling the hard metal kiss of my skin through the fabric of my pants, and ran back to the front of the house. The rest of the party was fun, filled with games and dancing, but I couldn't stop thinking about the strange clown and his gift. That night was worse than usual. I think the energy of the day was too much for Dad. By dinner, he had already sunk himself into his fourth bottle of nasty-smelling beer and was slurring his words as he told me just to throw something in the microwave. I watched the cheese in my Hot Pocket bubble, closing my eyes and silently wishing myself elsewhere. The microwave beeped 3 times, and Dad called for me to bring him another beer. I obliged. As I rounded the corner into the living room, where he was watching TV, shoes propped up on the trash-covered table. I tripped on the carpet, sending the beer bottle flying. The foamy liquid splattered on the carpet. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" he shouted, jumping up and knocking over his empty bottles. He crossed the room, grabbing at my collar and hoisting me off the ground, until my toes were dangling. "Little fucking idiot." He spat in my face and started crying, tears pouring freely. That just made him angrier. Thinking he was going to hit me, I braced for the impact, only to be dropped back to the floor. Through the tears, his face was dark, shadowed. Placing a hand on my bruised shoulder, he dug his thumb into it. I yelped, trying to pull away, but he kept pressing harder and harder until I thought it would snap. I wanted to hit him, But I knew that would be a death sentence. Just when I thought I might black out from the pain, he released me, shoving me away from him. I hit the wall and slumped down, landing in a wet spot from the spilled bottle. Without another word, he stormed away down the hall, slamming the door to his bedroom. In between hitched sobs, I heard the microwave beep again, reminding me of my hot pocket. I picked myself off the ground, tugging at my stretched shirt and rubbing my sore shoulder, and made my way into the kitchen. No longer hungry, I tossed the food in the trash and went to my room. Why? I thought to myself. Why did he have to hurt me? Does he not love me anymore? I didn't leave. Mom did. The same tired jumble of thoughts I'd returned to over and over again since his anger turned outward ran through my head. I flopped onto the bed, exhausted, and rolled over, hiding my face in the pillow. Something hard bit into my leg, and I remembered the buzzer. I took it out of my pocket. There didn't seem anything special about it. Turning it over my palm, I noticed the inscription on the back. Set into the sleek metal surface, the name Mr. Pogo was embedded in a thick, flowery script. Why had he given it to me? I wiped my wet face with the back of my hand. On the front, it had a little nub poking from the center, the part that you're supposed to touch to your victim's palm without thinking. I pressed it, expecting a little shock. From the belly of the house, a deep bellow exploded. I could hear a muffled, "What the fuck?" being shouted. My dad's voice. Staring at the buzzer, I contemplated it for a moment. It had to be a weird coincidence, right? The pad of my finger lingered on the metal stick.
Did you finally finish?
And I pressed it down again.
Yeah,
A
okay.
static shock crackled in the air, and I could almost see my dad jumping in his bed, flinging the sheets off him and pounding the bedside table as he drunkenly screamed in pain. With confusing visions of power dancing in my head, I slept safe and sound that night, in the comfort of the buzzer. The next morning, sat at the table with a bowl of cereal and a piece of slightly burnt toast. I silently watched as Dad poured himself a cup of coffee and rubbed his head. With bleary, shadowed eyes, he looked like he hadn't slept in a wink, and the hangover clung to him like a petulant child. I grinned into my spoon. All day, through the white noise of my teacher's words, all I could think about was the buzzer and Mr. Pogo. At least, I assumed that was his name. The strange clown had given me a gift, but why? How had he known, and why did he care? Questions breezed through my mind like frantic birds throughout the rest of the day. As the bell signifying the end of school rang, I panicked and packed up my things and headed to the door, with memories of his bright colors running rampant in my head.
Why is it saving?
As soon as I got home, I ran into my room, throwing myself onto my bed and grabbing the buzzer from underneath my pillow. There had to be more to it. I turned it over and over in my hands, looking for some secret sign, some tell to its magic, but only saw stainless steel and my new friend's name. I went to sleep early that night. As I drifted off, I could have sworn I heard bells jingling against the curve of the wind. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, little gifts started to appear in odd places. A silky pair of red and white pants, and a frilly shirt under my bed, a plastic jar of white, creamy paste in my closet, and a small blue and yellow hat with a shiny golden bell on it hanging from the bedside lamp. I wasn't worried, and I didn't tell Dad about any of them. I knew it was just Mr. Pogo, trying to tell me that he was watching, that he would keep me safe. Better yet, I could see the colors in all of his gifts. Dad only acted up once during that time, when I forgot to close the door to the backyard. I earned a shiny new bruise on my stomach, and the loss of the air in my lungs for that one. lying in bed, curled up in pain, I grabbed for my buzzer and held down on it for a little longer than I probably should have. Dad's screams ricocheted off the walls, sending chills of excitement creeping up my spine. The next day, I could hear him muttering about the doctors, strokes, and all sorts of other words I didn't really care about. On my way home, I could think of nothing but what new present I might unearth that night. The gifts were erratic, but they were always wonderful. The second I walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. My dad's shoes were in the hallway. He was home. Usually he didn't arrive home from wherever he went during the day until at least an hour or two after I got back from school. "Dad?" I called out, tentatively. Silence greeted me as I walked through the dark front hall. It wasn't in the living room, not in the kitchen. The door to his bedroom was closed without any light showing from underneath it. I shrugged and went to my room, but stopped dead in my tracks when I saw there was clearly a light on inside. I called out again. "Dad, are you here?" My voice sounded small, nervous. I turned the knob and pushed the door in. It was sitting on my bed, the red silky fabric of my special pants showing through his clenched fists. He looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen crawling across his face and said, in a low, husky voice, "You been dressing up, boy?" I shook my head, unsure of what to say. "Found this. Thought you could hide it." He hiccuped. "Thought you could hide this faggot shit from me." "Dad, I found your makeup, too." "What you need makeup for? You gonna go suck some cock at school like a pretty boy? That it?" He hurled the plastic jar towards me, hitting the door frame. It bounced off with a loud thud and rolled across the carpet, stopping near the window. The sky outside was dark, like a cavernous mouth. It had started to rain, and the world was simply yawning in deep, stormy breaths, and I heard faint jingling. Standing up, bracing himself on the headboard, and knocking my bedside lamp to the floor, he stumbled forward, grabbing for me. I could smell the booze on him. It hit me in the face like a rank cloud. I didn't give him time to reach me. Dashing out the door, I slipped around the corner and ran through the hallway, stopping at the entrance to see if he was following, heart pounding in my ears. I could clearly hear his footsteps thundering behind me. I burst through the living room, around the island in the kitchen, and doubled back into the hallway. Reaching my bedroom door just as he realized where I was, I managed to get the door closed and locked, pressing my back against it as he returned, huffing and puffing, full of rage. He slammed a fist into it, shouting, "Open this fucking door!" And the wood flexed against me, but held fast. The storm was raging past my window now. I could see the trees in our backyard whipping back and forth in the wind, and a sheet of rain splattered against the window. A bolt of lightning shot across the sky, and I saw, for just a brief moment, a bright white face in the window. It was my friend, Mr. Pogo, come to help. I ran to the window, wrenching it open, as Dad pounded harder and harder against the door and shouted something unintangible into the roar of the outside world. Another bolt, and I saw that Mr. Pogo was gone. I shouted for him again, and then heard a loud jingling behind me. Spinning in place, I saw him, perfectly dry, dressed just the way he'd been at Maisie's party. He bounced up and down on his heels, spreading his arms wide. I ran to him and jumped up, snuggling into his embrace. He smelled like old books and sweet flowers and cotton candy. He held me tight for just a moment, and then set me down. "Mr. Pogo, I'm scared." He placed a long finger against my lips and gestured around us in a circle. I don't understand." Dad howled in the background, beating his fist raw against the door. It was beginning to splinter, small cracking noises punctuating the more methodic ones from outside. Mr. Pogo reached deep in his pocket and produced a flower with a long string attached to it. On the other end, there was a small pad with a button. He pinned the flower to my shirt and placed the button in my hand, closing my fingers around it. Jumping up, he flounced over to the window and plucked the jar of makeup up from where it had landed. He unscrewed it, coating his hand, and crossed back over to me. His feet didn't touch the ground as they moved. Quickly and gently, he spread the cold paste across my face. It smelled like the type of medicine my grandpa used to rub on his knees and back. And like something else. Licorice, maybe? He snatched up my pretty clothes, my shirt and pants, and helped me into them, just as it sounded like the door was about to snap in half under the weight of my dad's anger. Mr. Pogo placed a little hat on my head, pulling it down snug, and flicked the bell with his finger. It jingled. I giggled. I knew what I had to do. I had to show Dad that the world wasn't all scares and frights. We could laugh and have fun again. I grabbed up my buzzer and hopped over to the door. Looking back at Mr. Pogo, he gave me the okay sign with his hand, fingers seeming just a bit longer and thinner than usual, and winked. The movement was exaggerated, and as he opened his mouth, I saw he had no teeth. Just a bright, blood-red tongue and gaping blackness leading into his throat. The walls of my room glowed a faint neon green around me as I gripped the doorknob, giving him a silent, open-mouthed giggle, and unlocked the door. It opened. My dad spilled into the room, slamming into the opposite wall.
What the fuck is wrong with you, you little piece of shit?
He stopped mid-sentence as he looked behind me. Silly me. I would have introduced them. What? He began, but his mutterings were drowned out by the music, as though I had my very own carnival chorus. The sound of the majestic calliope spilled into the room, reverberating off every available surface. It filled the air, which was crackling with the scent of freshly made popcorn and peanuts and candied delights, and I felt new life flow into me. I must show Dad my new tricks. I bound over him, chucked him under his chin, and bopped him on the nose. He stared, mouth agape, at the dancing wonder his son had become. Bending forward, I gestured to my flower. He blinked a few times, then leaned forward to inspect it, letting another silent giggle slip through my body, with one hand over my mouth and the other gripping the button at the end of my string. I pressed down. A jet of wonderful-smelling liquid sprayed out of it, coating Dad's face. The second it made contact, he started clawing at it with his fingers, screaming with all his might. I knew my show was off to a good start. I glanced behind me. Mr. Pogo was clapping, the spindly stalks of his eyes bulging through the red, glossy caverns of his torn, open cheeks. Hopping from foot to foot, he clicked his razor-sharp claws together, leant back his head, and crowed. It was the first time I'd heard him make an actual sound. It was magnificent. I crowed alongside him, the sound swelling and pulsing in between blasts of the churning organ. Then I remembered my buzzer. I looked down on Dad, writhing and squirming, his face melting from his skin in festering ribbons, the muscles of his cheeks bubbling and bursting, sending sprays of green and orange and red all over the floor, and I pressed the button. How he convulsed. I pressed it again, watching him dance and jump in the air like a marionette. I, the gracious puppet master, held it down and watched his legs scramble and jolt in a frantic blur. Wanting to give my doll a proper send-off, he clawed backwards up the wall, propelled by my electric magnet, and clawed wildly at the doorframe. Trying to pull himself from the room, I could see most of the bone of his face now. His skin glinted, twinkling like a diamond from the outside, as the rest of his skin started to singe, parts of it popping under his clothes like wet popcorn at the fair. I jumped up and down, spinning and twirling, punching the button of my buzzer to the rhythm of my dance, with one final scream rippling through him like a siren. Dad's feet lifted from the floor entirely. He hovered in the air for just a moment, his bones seeming to vibrate right out of his body, and a sound like meat packing against the concrete tore through the house, and his body popped like a balloon. I jumped back, grabbing Mr. Pogo's claws, and they dug into my fingers, but I didn't mind. the steaming remnants of Dad falling around us like a mucusy rain, birthing a set of new legs. From the twitching black shell of his torso, Mr. Pogo tossed me onto his back. I settled in comfortably, and he skittered forward, stepping over Dad's ruined corpse, out the window, and dropped into the yard below. The storm screamed on around us as we danced into the night, skipping, pirouetting, and whirling gracefully through the raindrops. Two clowns looking for a brand new party. Hey everybody, hope you like this narration. Welcome to the Dark Somnium. This story is by the Reddit user Traveling Salesman, titled My Son Lives Inside of Mirrors. Someone once told me that happiness cannot exist without sorrow. That sorrow carves into our being like knives carve a cup for wine. We can only hold so much joy as sorrow is carved into our soul. But sorrow has carved out my entire soul. Yesterday took everything from me, and no one understands what happened. My wife and I had a little baby boy 6 years ago, and he was the light of our lives, a bubbling cherub of happiness. Rarely would he cry, but my dad antics would always elicit the giggles from him and put a spark back into his eye. As he grew older, however, things began to get strange. He was happy less, and yet never sad. He was a straight line of emotion, and no Christmas present ever got more from him than a feeble smile. I traveled for work, and my wife would
Damn,
always
if I knew it was gonna take this long, I would have fucking just made it completely from scratch.
But the child never smiled. He would disappear into his room for a long time, simply staring out the window, or into the mirror. My wife would sneak up on him sometimes, since he was being too quiet for a little boy, to see what he was up to. Always, he was staring out the window, a vacant stare on his face. And he read from time to time, better than most at such a young age. It made me proud, but the staring was odd. It troubled my wife greatly, especially when she would walk in on him facing the mirror, one hand on the glass, staring at his own eyes. He rarely spoke. Dead eyes, Jerry. He just stares and stares. It bothers me. She would start to cry. She couldn't understand why he didn't make any friends or want to go outside. Make him go play outside. Push his butt out the door and get him into the sun. I did. I found him staring into the house through the side window. It scared the shit out of me. Even on the playground, he just stared off into space, sitting. Teacher tells me that he likes to stare into the windows by the playground, staring inside. Jerry, I don't know why he's so weird. Nothing on Google explained why he loved to stare into mirrors and through windows. It wore my wife's nerves down. The last time I came home for a few days, a scream woke me up in the dead of a dark night. I grabbed my gun, thinking it was a home invader, only to find my wife, sobbing, outside of our son's room. He was unfazed, simply gazing at himself in the mirror. Honey, what's wrong? This is just his face for now. No, Jerry, you don't understand. The mirror. She sobbed, sloppily, and snot ran down her face into her hands. And the reflection in the mirror was smiling. Our son was not. After an initial chill, I scoffed. Sweetheart, you need to get some rest. She's right, Daddy. The boy inside the mirror smiles sometimes. I like to keep him company. He goes wherever I go, if he wants. Sometimes he stays at home. He says he misses me. Son, what do you mean? The mirror is your own reflection. If he smiles, it's because you're smiling. I tried to soothe my wife as I spoke to him, crouching on the floor at eye level with him, No, Daddy, this boy is different than me. Even if he looks like me. Other kids called me creepy for talking about him, but he's there with me sometimes, watching me from the window. I had nothing to say in reply. I put him into bed. He stared out his window and hid his face from me. He was irritated because I didn't believe him. Imagination can play tricks on children, and those with their nerves worn to shreds. A week later, I was at a conference, and my wife blew up my phone. Call after call after call, so I ran outside to answer, obviously an emergency, and she was frantic. Jerry, the kid is at school, but I saw him in the mirror. I saw him. Jerry, he isn't lying. I'm not imagining this. I swear to God, I saw his reflection, and he smiled at me. I'm coming home now, Kate. I'll be on the next flight. Something was terribly wrong. I knew I had to get home before she hurt herself, or the kid. Several hours flew by, and I peeled into the driveway and threw myself into a run from the car, and I spilled into the house like a tornado. Kate, I'm home. Where are you? In here, Jerry. The house was dark. Curtains were drawn, but fluttering in the breeze. She had smashed all the windows in the house. I noticed a mirror in the hallway was smashed too. Kate? I called out softly. I was horrified. She had finally lost it, and this strange child was too much for her. I should have been there for her instead of working. I hate myself for not being there. I found her, sitting in front of the mirror in the child's room. An old mobile spun lazily on the ceiling. Where's our son, Kate? He's here, Jerry. Right here. She pointed at the mirror. I saw her sitting in the reflection, makeup running from her eyes. Our son was in her lap. I could see his face in the mirror. He was stoic. But then I saw her point to a part of the mirror. Standing behind me was our son. I whirled around to see nothing but blank space and shadows. Looking back again, the child was now in front of my reflection, holding her image's arms up. She had a gun to her head. I don't understand, she whispered, and blew her brains out. I had no time to react. Daddy, Mom didn't like me. A normal child would have screamed, but his face was like iron. Blood trickled down his cheek. I fell to the ground and began to sob. I was mortified. The other me told me that the world is different where he is. Everything is backwards. It sounds fun. I want to go. I know how to. And Mommy almost got every mirror in the house, but this one. We stopped her. Want to come with me, Daddy? It will be like an adventure. And the next thing I knew, the child had a gun to his head too. The other child was behind him, hand on his shoulder, smiling with a grin of a Cheshire. All I remember is the gunshot. I blacked out. The police ruled it a murder-suicide. I couldn't have told them anything other than the normal story. No one would have believed me anyway. But now I sit in front of the mirror when I'm alone in his old room, and they play together. They both smile, always smiling, finally happy. I think I'm going to join them. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like my narrations, make sure to like and subscribe so I can spend more time creating music and narrations for you. Have a good day. I didn't have a voice until you read this. Let me explain. I was voiceless, but I still existed, and we all did. We've been here ever since the first men peered fearfully out of their caves into the deep, still darkness beneath a moonless sky and thought, what could be hiding out there? Us. We were. I've been with you since you were a child. Remember those times when you woke in the night, inconsolable, tears streaming down your face until the grown-ups came and reassured you? There's nothing there, they'd say. There's nothing to fear. They were wrong. It was me, under the bed, in the wardrobe, under the stairs. It was always me. I'm with you now, constantly. Your fears bonded us forever. When you see that flicker of movement out of the corner of your eye as you walk home alone on a deserted street at night, when you hear that creaking floorboard just outside your bedroom door as you cower under your blankets, the prickling sensation on the back of your neck, as if you're being watched when you could have sworn you were by yourself. It's me. It's always me. It always was. I'm not a demon, not a ghost. I'm not a monster or some creepy boogeyman. My kind are what we are. You may have heard of the Tibetan tulpas, beings summoned into existence through sheer force of will and concentration. I suppose that is the closest that man has ever come to finding a term that describes me and my kin. We come from belief too. That irrational fear of the dark.
Man, I didn't think that was gonna finish that quick all of a sudden.
The horrors that tiptoe through your nightmares and return suddenly and without warning during the waking hours, filling you with dread. You know it's silly to be scared. You chastise yourself, face flushed, tutting and sighing, chiding your rogue imagination for such fanciful and nonsensical behavior, but you do it again and again and again. There are parts of your brain that won't be told otherwise. Maybe that's what keeps us here. Or maybe we're the reason it won't ever be quiet. Which do you think it is? I know. And just like I know that your mind is the world's greatest gift to us, until you started to read this, I didn't have a voice. Now, as your treacherous consciousness speaks these words aloud inside the confines of your mind, it's my voice you're hearing. It seems strange to me, not the voice I would have chosen, but it's the one that your fears bequeath to me, the voice that haunts you the most, the tone most likely to cause you to shiver and break into a cold, helpless sweat, has become mine because of what we share. And we share a lot, you and I, a whole lifetime, every single day. I'm watching you now, studying you as you stare nervously at your glowing screen, praying that its light will be enough to protect you from the things in the shadows, because I think I might be the first of my kind to realize something about the way things are between us. I watch you all the time, even when you're sleeping, stood at the foot of your bed, gazing down at you. I know when you're thinking of me. I hear the whimpers and the gasps. I see the involuntary jolts and shudders, and I smile. You're picturing me doing it, aren't you? Go on. Imagine me standing there in your room, my shadow looming over your prone, terrified body, my wide grin showing my glinting teeth in the moonlight. Thank you. Before you did that, I never had a face. Now you've given me one. The face of your darkest phobias. I like it. It was the only face I could have ever worn. In the short time it's taken you to read my story, you've already given me a voice and a face. I wonder what gifts you'll bestow upon me tomorrow. Maybe in time, I'll teach you. Just imagine my hot breath against your ear, my icy fingers on the nape of your neck, my teeth and claws sliding into your trembling, yielding flesh. Thank you. Oh, what fun we're going to have.
Oh, sure.
Speed Limits by Gretel Sweets. Can you believe how sick the universe is? I sobbed at the psychiatrist, who opted to listen as opposed to calming me down. Smart man. I don't think I could stop, even if I wanted to at this point. If that little prick had been going 5 miles less per hour, my daughter would have survived. That's pretty twisted. I laughed in disbelief, my tears blurring my vision so bad I only saw the outline of the good doctor. Can you believe that, Dr. Hilson? If that bastard had been going 30 miles per hour instead of 35, my daughter's little body wouldn't have gone flying over his car, and the chances of her dying would have been decreased to 50 instead of 80. There's a reason why the neighborhood speed limit is 30. I waited for the old man to say something, but he remained silent, his wide eyes staring at me. I gritted my teeth in anger. Really? He didn't have anything to say? He's a well-known and respected psychologist in our city, for God's sake. What's his problem? He should be used to his patients pouring their hearts out to him. Where were his soothing words of comfort? You know what's sicker? The judge had the nerve to let that murderer off the hook just because his daddy is some rich head doctor. I glared at the doctor, who was tightly strapped to the passenger seat of my car. I turned the key and started up my car, the headlights flickering on and illuminating the kid who killed my daughter. He was lying on his stomach in the street. He was not even a quarter of a mile away from my car. When the headlights hit him, the kid started moving around frantically, but the ropes around his ankles and arms kept him on the empty street. Even in the dark, he looked just like a worm. I turned to the head doctor and smiled at him. He started shaking. My tears kept falling. Let's do an experiment. My daughter's neck broke when your son hit her going 35 miles per hour. I wonder what will happen if I hit your son doing 40. I hit the gas and the car shot forward. Finally, the doctor started to scream. The car jumped a little as the tires rolled over his son's body. I rolled my eyes at the incoherent noises the shrink was making and looked at the rearview mirror. My burning eyes widened in shock. He's still moving. Damn. Statistically speaking, there's a 20% chance of your kid living through that. Tough boy. I wonder. I tapped my finger against the steering wheel, ignoring the shrink's pleas, before I got a great idea. I beamed at him. Let's see how long he can last. I backed up over the kid, going 5 miles per hour this time. He was still moving. Okay, let's try 10.
The hell did it just end there? Yeah, just ended there.
I found something impossible in my backyard by Nick Boddick. In my backyard, we have a koi pond. It's been kind of a never-ending project of mine and my wife's. Something we've put a lot of time, effort, and money into in the last 3 years we've lived in our house. A few weeks ago, we decided to extend it some, and I finally got started on what needed to be done to do that last week. I started digging. After about 3 hours, I dug a good amount of the area I needed to out, and was about 4 feet down in this particular spot when I hit something. Whatever it was metal. I continued digging, looking for an edge of whatever this was, and I found it. I followed the edge around as I kept digging, and it turned out to be a square with a handle on top and 2 hinges on one side. I pulled up on the handle, but I couldn't get it open. I figured it was a chest or a case of some kind. So I dug around the sides of it, but no matter how far I dug, it just kept going. I finally came to the conclusion that it was a hatch of some sort, perhaps a bomb shelter. When we bought the house, there had been no mention of a bomb shelter there, nor had there ever been a mention of it in the history of the house. I dug an area around the hatch so I could more easily get to the top. After a few hours, a night of sleep, and a few more hours, the next day of blowtorches, drills, and hammers, I finally got the hatch open. As soon as I pulled the door off, I was hit with a wave of foul odor. The smell was stale and putrid, and was like a mixture of rotten eggs, spoiled milk, and a group of dead skunks. After taking a moment to catch my breath, I finally was able to hold it while I looked inside. There was a ladder that led downwards, probably about 20 feet, and I could just barely make out a floor what the sunlight provided. I went to my garage and got a dust mask, hoping it would at least mask the smell some, and grabbed a flashlight. I began to descend down the ladder while my wife stayed up top, curiously observing. The smell only worsened the further down I got, and the mask was doing next to nothing to offset it. I stopped several times on the way down, warding off the urge to vomit. Finally, I think I got used to it enough not to gag with every breath I took. I made it to the bottom, and there was a small corridor to the left, past which was a large room. Just as I had suspected, it looked like a fallout shelter. There were 2 rows of shelving units that once held non-perishable foods, almost all of which were gone. I found a light switch on the wall next to me, which I turned on. To my surprise, 3 rows of fluorescent lights lit up, allowing me to see the entire area. The room was large, likely taking up nearly 2/3 of the square footage under my basement. There was a single twin bed with a nightstand next to it, on which was a handheld radio. I can't imagine it working that far underground. There was a rug on the floor, on top of which was a small desk. On the desk were multiple books, numerous notepads, and various other belongings. In one corner of the room was a bucket that was clearly used for relieving oneself, as evidenced by the crusted over shit on the sides and the various yellow stains. How the contents of the bucket were removed from the hatch, I have no clue. There was a makeshift hanging rod attached to one of the walls, on which was a very, very old-looking suit, and resting on top of it was a military helmet. I collected the loose contents of the shelter, the books, notepads, radio, helmet, etc., and placed them in a box that I found near the food racks. One odd thing I noticed is that there were no remnants from food products that were consumed. This place had obviously been used, as the bed was unkempt, the toilet had been utilized. There was no area where trash was kept, and I didn't think much of it. I hadn't yet looked at what the notepads contained, but when I did finally take a look, I was thoroughly creeped out. All they said, for hundreds of pages, were the words, "Please let me out." Nothing else, just those words, written in different sizes over countless pages. Next, I did some research on the helmet. It was a standard issue United States Army helmet used during World War II. I don't understand what a soldier would be doing in a fallout shelter in the Midwest during the Second World War. The next thing I found to be strange was that, while most of the books were from the same period the helmet was from, 2 of them were printed in the late 2000s, and the radio was a model that was produced in 1999. Completely baffled, I returned to the shelter, and I again descended the ladder. I decided to do a thorough inspection of the place, my hope being to gain any kind of insight as to who had been down there. I looked at the remaining food on the shelves. It all seemed to be from World War II era. I looked for hidden doors, but found nothing. The walls were all perfectly solid, without a flaw to note. I sat down in the chair at the desk and opened the drawers, but found nothing. I examined the desk for anything that may have been etched into it, but the wood was next to flawless. It was only when I backed the chair up over the rug and took a step back that I realized the floor beneath me was hollow. I yelled up to my wife that I had found something. I moved the chair to the side and pushed the desk off the rug. Then I slid the rug to the opposite direction of the desk, which revealed a trap door, which was being held closed with a master lock that sat in a divot cut into the metal floor so as to keep the floor flush. I used a hammer and chisel, and after a short time, I dismantled the padlock. I opened the hatch within the hatch and fell back after getting a glimpse of its contents. Beneath the trapdoor was the source of the smell. It was a decomposing body. One that looked as if it had only been there for a week or two. The area was just big enough to fit this man, who was positioned in a way I didn't presume possible for a human. The only way I can describe him as is folded up. I immediately called up to my wife to call 911.
Why?
He got out
He's
of the
gonna about to
hatch.
trap his ass.
The man was wearing clothes from the World War II era. In his pocket was a military ID, showing that he was born in 1979. I found out later that the name on the military ID wasn't registered in any armed forces database, and his social security number wasn't one that was distributed by the United States. Nobody by his name was ever reported missing in the history of the country. It was determined by investigators that the ground above the hatch had remained untouched for decades, and it was confirmed that the door was in fact the only means of entering and exiting the shelter. The questions are obvious. Who was this man? How did he have this technology from the future? How long was he in the shelter for when he died? When did he die? Where did all the shit and piss and garbage go? And how was he only a week or two decomposed? The strangest question, to me, however, is who locked him under that trap door and moved the rug and desk back over it.
Hey guys, okay, so
My friend is sending me these weird texts by No Sleep User 2016. I threw a Halloween party last night, and the inevitable happened. Lots of people came that weren't, strictly speaking, invited. I wasn't going to be a hard ass about it. There were enough of my friends that showed up that I was able to enlist them to help keep an eye on my place and make sure people didn't wander places they weren't welcome. Before long, everyone was mingling and having a good time. I saw my buddy Dave chatting up this really attractive girl that I didn't know. And I remember thinking, good luck, she's out of your league. I think she even asked him out to dinner. But then I promptly forgot about it since I was busy with hosting duties. The only reason I remember it now is because I got a series of increasingly odd texts from Dave after the party. And here's how it started. 12:15 a.m. Dave. Dude, where am I? 12:16 a.m. Me. I don't know. Home, maybe? 12:18 a.m. Dave, nah. I was at your party. Now I'm somewhere else. 12:19 a.m. Me. Yes, that's what happens when you leave a party. 12:20 a.m. Dave. Nah, man, I didn't leave your party. I was there talking to this girl. Now I'm here in this room. 12:20 a.m. Me. What room? 12:23 a.m. Dave. It's got wood-paneled walls, old-looking green couch, a blue upholstered wingback chair, an ugly oil painting, and some sort of metal disc on the floor, and an old wooden TV. 12:24 a.m. Me. A wooden TV. 12:25 a.m. Dave. You know, an old tube TV inside a wood cabinet. Looks 60s-ish. What the fuck? It just turned on. It's black and white. 12:25 a.m. Me. Okay. 12:26 a.m. Dave. There's no door or windows. What is this place? Did you do this? 12:27 a.m. Me. Do what? Roofie you and stick you in a room made of the 60s? With no way out? No, I didn't. I'm cutting in here because we spent the next several texts going back and forth. Him accusing me of drugging him because I wanted to meet this girl he had been talking to, and me denying it. Then him telling me what he could pick up on the TV. It sounded like some sort of closed circuit showing him other rooms similar to his. Some with a person and some empty. And finally him giving me a running commentary on his attempts to find a way out of the room. I was ready to tell him I had to go to bed. And then this happened. 12:42 a.m. Dave. There's a girl in the room next to mine, I think. Me. Why do you think that? Dave. I was banging on the walls trying to find a door. The TV was on her room, and I saw her react to my banging. Then she started banging on her wall, and I heard it. I can't hear her speak, and the banging is really muffled. Wait. She stopped. She's looking around her room. She's covering her ears. Like she's hearing something real loud. Wait a minute. 12:46 a.m. Me. What's going on? At this point, Dave left me hanging for several minutes. I had decided this was a prank Dave was playing on me in an effort to get back at me for ruining his chances with that girl. I had gotten ready for bed and was about to send a final text to Dave, thanking him for wasting my time, when he finally got back on the line. 12:57 a.m. Okay, dude, this has gone on long enough. I'm completely freaked out, so congrats on that. You can let me out now. 12:59 a.m. Me. Dave, I swear I have nothing to do with wherever you are. I was about to tell you that I had enough of your prank because I have to get up for work in a few hours. What's going on? Dave, I was watching the girl in the next room. She was covering her ears and cowering. I could hear some sort of faint buzzing, but that was it. You remember me telling you about the metal disc on the floor? It's apparently some sort of transporter because something materialized on it. As soon as it appeared, the buzzing stopped. The thing on the disc wasn't human. It was about the size of a grown man, but that was where any similarity to people ended. That was where any similarity to people ended. It was shrouded in darkness, like it was completely blurred out. Oh, no, I hear the buzzing. Me, Dave, if you're punking me, knock it off. I have to get up early, and this is starting to piss me off. Dave, I think it's some kind of zoo. I saw those things look at the other people in their rooms on the TV. I'm completely freaked out, man. Just tell me this is a joke. I'm not even mad anymore. I just want out, okay? Me, I'm done, man. If you want to keep texting me, it'll be a silent phone. I'm off to bed. Dave, don't go. I hear the buzzing. I think it's coming for me. It's too loud. So I went to bed, and I woke up at 6 and checked my phone. He kept sending these texts for a while. He just wouldn't give it up. Here's the rest of his nonsense. 1:19 a.m. Dave. The thing came into the room, man. It appeared on the disc and did something that prevented me from moving. But even though it was right here in the room, I still couldn't see it. It was all just a dark void, like that vent of black I heard about. I couldn't make out any detail at all. Then this black tendril reached out for me. It actually touched me, like it was petting a dog that looks like it left some food behind that looks like cereal. I think I'm in some kind of zoo, a petting zoo. The girl in the room near me. 1:33 a.m. Dave. The girl in the room near mine is gone. Her room was channel 7 on the TV, but it's empty now. Are you there? Why won't you let me go? 3:38 a.m. Dave. I just saw one of those things take someone out of their room. It immobilized him. Then it took out a collar and a leash and put it around the poor guy's neck. Then he stood on the disc with the creature and they disappeared. Maybe this is more of a pet store than a petting zoo? I don't want to be some alien thing's pet, man. You've got to get me out of here. 1:52 a.m. Dave. I just saw one of those things examining a guy in one of the rooms. It was checking out his teeth and mouth like it was assessing a horse. It was poking and groping him on his sides and legs, too. It eventually just left him there, like he wasn't what it wanted. I don't know what I did to deserve this, but whatever it is, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, okay? Just let me out, please. This isn't happening, man. It can't be happening. I saw another one of the aliens examining a man. I thought it was doing the same thing that I saw on that guy on Channel 2. But then I saw it pull out something shiny. And before I could register what was happening, it slit his throat. It fucking killed him. Man, it's gutting him like a deer. I don't think this is a pet store. It's a butcher shop. It's like we're in tanks, like the lobster tank in a grocery store. The shopping for people. 2:15 a.m. Dave. It's coming, man. The alien, it's coming to my tank. Oh God, make the buzzing stop. 2:22 a.m. JK. Sleep well. At least he finally admitted it at the end. Even pranks give way to the need for sleep. I hope he was able to sleep off whatever possessed him to start this idiocy in the first place. He even wants to make it up to me. Here's his latest text. 8:27 a.m. Dave. I would like to meet you for food tonight.
And dude. Yes, it did. I like the face more. It's like a lot better than the previous face looked like. I'm just debating now if I want to. I'll probably end the stream because I need to eat because I haven't eaten since yesterday. But also to restart because I'm getting lagged across everything because this file is too damn big. I have to make some food and come back, or after I eat at least. Then I'll start working on posing her. I already know the pose I'm gonna give her. Because then after I pose her, I'm gonna start detailing her out more. Adding skin pores. I don't know if I'm gonna make an expression. Just because the pose I'm using, I don't feel like an expression. Or at least that's not major, like her mouth open or something like that. Yeah, I don't think it'll take too long to pose her. I think it's just I think the hardest thing is going to be the little subtle things. Because I know she's going to have 2 different hands, I think it's going to be. No, it's supposed to be more than that. So she's supposed to have sword in one hand, sword and shield and as one set. Another one where it's a sword and lasso, another one with the shield and lasso. I think that's it. And then there's gonna be I think there's gonna be another one that's just supposed to be her holding the lasso in general with both hands, specific way. Yeah, and I think that's it. So the little things will be like her lasso, I mean, her shield is going to be like on her back, sword attached. Since sword will be holstered into it. Still got to fix the sword just a second if it's not the way it should be. Yeah. I might make 2 different swords because I don't think a lot of people will be able to print it out Sculpting if they don't have resin printers, or at least a good enough one. I'm gonna make another one that's a little like thicker, I guess is the best way to put it. Or one has such a sharp tip. But I gotta fix this lower corner down. I mean the lower, like the tip of the blade. It's just thick right there. I might leave it. Make a separate one and then thicken it out and then cut it so it can be thicker in general, so I don't have to worry about it later. And then I'll have the one that'll be thinner. The thing I'm debating is the sword itself. Like, do I want it attached, like fully attached, or remove it, or I might also make one where, or maybe she's not holding anything. I don't know. We'll see. Let's see if I have to. I'm not sure exactly what I want to make yet. That's the other thing. Kind of want to make spaghetti. It's just going to take me longer to make the sauce. I'm also going to do, I don't know if it's going to be this year. I'm going to make an X-Men project where I am going to, I'm pretty much going to, I got to figure out exactly what I'm going to do first. I'm probably going to do some little real sketching. But I'm pretty much going to make it where I got to figure out what X-Men it's going to be. I know a few of them. It's going to be like Colossus, but it's going to be like 90s X-Men. I don't care too much for the current one. But it's going to pretty much be where over the next specific amount of months, can't say exactly how many because I got to figure out how many X-Men it's going to be. It's just going to be like a whole X-Men thing for those next few months. And so I know it's going to be Psylocke, Jubilee, Colossus, I think Gambit, more likely Cyclops, and obviously Wolverine. So that's 6 people. I gotta, and Jean, she's gonna be in it. I'm gonna make her Marvel Girl just because I like her as Marvel Girl a little more. If I do, I'll make her if I don't, I'll make her the 90s Jean as well. And Storm, obviously. Yeah, and Rogue, so that's like 9 fucking characters. That's gonna go over 9 months, I guess. Unless I get good enough and fast enough where I can go faster. But what it's gonna end up being is I gotta figure out exactly how to do it because it's gonna be a lot of fucking work. But either way, it's gonna be a big diorama. So the first set of characters will literally be the ones on the ground. So let's say it's gonna be Colossus. I know I'm gonna do something with Colossus. He's either gonna be like tipping over the they're gonna be fighting a Sentinel. Sorry, I didn't explain that. But each character is gonna have a piece of the Sentinel. So you pretty much, if you want the whole thing, you need to like get all the characters. I'm also gonna make a section where you don't probably won't have need the Sentinel, but if you want the entire diorama, you need all of them. But either way, so like pretty much all the characters give a certain amount of Sentinel, so this way, it's just gonna work. I'm sure I'm gonna have to design the Sentinel first, which is gonna be a bitch because I'm not used to hard surfaces and doing all that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna have to learn how to use this one other tool, which I need to learn anyway. But yeah, so I'm gonna do that. It'll be, like I said, Sentinel. I'm probably gonna work on first, so I can add all the other characters after. And this way, it makes sense where they're gonna be at and everything. So, and I gotta really figure out who's gonna be where, because they need to be in a position in a way where they can obviously be grounded and not just elevated from nothing, and then they're gonna break off. Yeah, but I'm gonna more than likely Wolverine's gonna be at the very top. He's gonna be based on this piece I did where he's like ripping Sentinel's head off. The loss is gonna be pretty much probably tipping over the freaking Sentinel. If not, I'm thinking he's gonna be like the Sentinel's gonna be punching at him, and he's either gonna punch back or he's gonna be blocking it either way. I'm trying to make it where I don't have to make the Sentinel like fucking 40 inches or some shit by, you know, it's standing up. And like I said, just gonna be in pieces, you know. If not, if it ends up being a little too much, then I'll probably have the Sentinel kind of broken in pieces, where like each X-Men has like a section of it, like, well, not, you know, like on an arm, like something like that. But like I said, I gotta probably sketch it really fast, figure out how it's gonna work. I don't want anybody's gonna want to print it at a decent size, because it's gonna be a print that's probably gonna be like somewhere between 20 and 30 inches total. So the Sentinel's gonna have to be in some kind of like position where it's kneeling down or something in some manner, whether it's throwing a punch down, whatever it is, but to reduce its size. So this way the X-Men could be around 7 to 8 inches, maybe 9 inches in height. If they're standing obviously straight up. This way, there's no stress about it. Because trying to print that out is going to be one hell of a thing. But yeah, like I said, I'm going to do something like that. So I'm going to have it where it goes over the next few months on Patreon, and then at some point it'll go on Etsy or something, or like I said, somewhere, and then it, you know, it'll be there. Because I think I'm going to close my Gumroad. My Gumroad is just not doing anything. Actually, I think I need to upload 2 or 3 items from there, to there, but either way, I haven't gotten any traction on my Gumroad. But I also need to update all my social media, because they look like nobody, you know, is on there. So, but I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try to do other dioramas over time. I want to do some of the Dark Side. I also want to do Thanos one. Yeah, we'll see what's gonna happen. But all right, I'm gonna go get some food, figure out whatever it is, and then I'll be back after I'm done eating. Okay. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Appreciate it. If you haven't hit the follow button, I appreciate it if you do. And I'll see you in like an hour or something. See y'all later. Yeah.